really recommend is to just click on view on the top right side of your Zoom screen and have it set up to speaker view or gallery, one of the two. And then keep your camera off for the duration of our guests today that are speaking. This way, the camera on with our guests, they'll be the focal point and the priority sequence of what you can see on your screen today. So again, if everyone can turn their videos off and just also ensure that their mics are off, that would be super helpful. And we will kick off officially in just a minute as we wait for a few more guests to join us today. But in the meantime, I'd love to have you introduce yourselves in the chat box. If you don't mind sharing, your name, where you are tuning in from today, your business, if you want to share a little bit about it, that would be great. Just feel free to enter that in the chat box. And it would be just great to get to know our community who is here today a little bit more. All right. Awesome. And I myself personally, I am in Ottawa today, and I'm the founder of Founders Fund and Teas, and I'll get into a much more formal introduction shortly, but very excited to lead today's event. And I guess we'll kick it off officially now. So welcome to our winter edition of Seasons of Success, and I'm your host for today's event, which I'm incredibly excited about for many reasons. It's the first time we've actually hosted an event exclusively focused on the topic and complexities facing impact-focused businesses and how that's shifted as we lead and build companies and what that looks like and the challenges we're all experiencing in this current post-pandemic economy, while also trying to nurture our businesses to be resilient and here for the long term through intentional leadership and execution. But don't forget to also strive to keep our mental, physical, and emotional health in balance in the process of it all. No pressure, right? So a little bit about me for those who are joining Founders Fund for the first time for our event today. My name is Sheena Brady, and I'm the founder of Teas, which you can learn more about us specifically at teaswellness.com. And we are a wellness-centric tea company that focuses on elevating your everyday wellness rituals through tea and botanical inspired self-care essentials. And an extension of what we do at Teas, being very much a mission and values-driven brand, is investing in the next generation of underrepresented entrepreneurs through our Founders Fund community, which is what we're focusing on here today. And so for Founders Fund, we provide barrier-free funding, free education and resources and events, as well as one-on-one mentoring. And at Founders Fund, we have always believed that our work in supporting women in business has been vitally important to the future economic success and equality, but especially now in this post-pandemic economy, we're seeing it as critical, which is why we are so pleased to be able to offer programming like this free of cost, thanks to our partners at BDC. I have to give BDC a shout out here. I'd be remiss if I did not. And BDC is an invaluable values-aligned program partner for us at Founders Fund. And since 1944, BDC, also known as the Business Development Bank of Canada, is the only financial institution devoted exclusively to Canadian entrepreneurs. BDC helps create and develop strong Canadian businesses through financing, advisory services, and capital, with a focus on small and medium-sized enterprises. Additionally, BDC became the first financial institution in Canada to receive a B Corp certification, a certification that is part of a growing international movement that aims to use the power of businesses for broader societal good, which, of course, we're here today to dive a lot more into this topic specifically. Because of our partnership with BDC, we're able to provide our programming and events to our community free of charge and in an accessible format. And with every event, we love to see what some of your valuable takeaways are. If you learn something or find some inspiration in one of our speakers today, we encourage you to share and tag them on social media at the Founders Fund and BDC as well. And I'll put this information in the chat box in a little bit as well. This way, we can not only reshare it with the broader community, what some of your inspiration and lessons learned are, but to make it fun, we're also going to issue a $100 gift card to Stacey Martin Lifestyle and Encircled, which are two incredible businesses that you're going to learn a lot more about today as they're speakers and part of our Founders Fund community. So a few minor housekeeping items. Our team is going to link a document later in the chat box for a little bit more information on how to change your screen name and whatnot if you want to, or how to access closed captioning. I'd also, excuse me, and oh, sorry, we love questions, of course, too. So don't hold back on your questions. You can share them in the chat box at any time. And when we find an appropriate moment, we'll be sure to surface that question as well to our speakers. As we begin, I'm also going to take a moment to acknowledge and give gratitude to the people that cared for and protect the land that I call home. I'm currently on the unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory, land that has been cared for and inhabited by many nations. Without the care and kindness and innovations of the Indigenous and First Nations people, my home would be a very different place. And for that, I am deeply grateful for the knowledge, generosity, and strength of these communities. If you would like to get to know the people and land of your home, we always recommend the app called Whose Land, which again, I'll make sure that I share that information as well later if you would like to check it out. And with that, I'm very excited to introduce our very first session of the day. I'd like to welcome Christy Zomer to our first session of our fireside chat today. Hi, Christy, how are you?
I'm good, Gina. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so glad that you can join us today for our session. And I'm just going to pull up your bio. Sorry, I should have had it like I've got so many screens going on right here. But of course, I'm sure that you would be able to also be able to introduce yourself just as well to our community. But a little bit about Christy. So Christy, I'm so sorry. Let me just get up your proper bio here. Hold on a minute. My apologies. Actually, Christy, would you mind introducing yourself to our community? I'm so sorry to put you on the spot like this. And I'm going to pull up your bio. I had it up and I don't know, I've got too many tabs. I think it's a reflection of my brain right now.
Oh, God. Don't worry. I have like 3 browsers with 50 tabs in them. So I can definitely introduce myself. I'm Christy Sumer. I'm the founder and CEO of the sustainable fashion brand Encircled. We are based in Toronto and 100% made in Toronto. We focus on a category of clothing that we've created called Wander Leisure, which is essentially elegant athleisure that you can wear, traveling for life. It really features that versatility, that dress up, dress down, and above all, comfort. We're best known for our dressy sweatpants, which is a sweatpant you can wear to work. We're also a certified B Corp, and we've been around since 2012, so we're not new to the game. So I originally come from a background we can talk about a little bit later on, I think, in the questions as well. So I don't come from a fashion background, so I'm a bit of a transplant into the fashion industry, but I'm excited to join Sheena today and chat more about it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And also, I want to show this to our community. You are the founder of Retail Blitz Consulting, which helps e-commerce stop by retailers clarify their vision and develop a focused brand strategy that's also aligned with their values. And that's coming from over 14 years of experience in retail consulting, consumer packaged goods industry, and so much more, which is really highly intertwined with what we're going to dive into as well. So thank you so much for joining us. And I guess, obviously, naturally, the first question that I have for you today in our conversation is, if you're open to sharing with our community, what inspired you to actually start Encircled? Because you're very much, again, like when I think of people, values-driven leaders that really walk the talk with their integrity just as much externally as they do internally, you're one of the top that come to mind. And so I'm even personally curious, what led you to start Encircled early on? And what were some of those problematic industry challenges that supported your desire to manufacture clothing differently in the first place?
Yeah, so I guess long story short, my background leading up to Encircled, so it's not like I dropped out of high school or college and started a business. Like I was in a corporate career for almost 10 years prior. So I lived that corporate life. My latest role was in management consulting, which for those of you who've had some exposure to that industry prior to the pandemic, for sure, it was 5-day a week travel. So I was living out of a suitcase, traveling across the country, sometimes globally around the world as well. So it was definitely a high travel industry. I was, always wanted to go carry on only, but really struggled with travel clothing being either, cargo pants with zip off legs or I was trying to kind of retrofit a pantsuit to try and make it more comfortable. So when I'm sitting on a plane for like 4 hours, I don't feel like I'm, chopping myself in half. And so that was really the inspiration for creating our first garment, the Chrysalis Cardi, which is like an 8-in-1 piece that we still have today on our website. You can probably do it like 20 different ways, but it's essentially a big scarf that turns into all these different ways to wear it. And it was definitely our most popular piece. And it was the piece we had for a couple of years. And it was really all about, doing more with less, traveling lighter, having fewer pieces that are better made. Because that piece itself, it's definitely not new to have a convertible kind of travel garment, but the ones that I saw were so poorly made. The materials were see-through, they would fall apart, you had to tie them, it looked really awful. So we did it in a different way by using hidden hand-sewn snaps. We used really beautiful, luxurious, like tencel modal fabric, and manufacturing it locally, so it's super high quality. So that became like a really big pillar of the business from the get-go. So essentially the business started with this problem I wanted to solve for myself, which was, basically designing more stylish and comfortable travel clothing that could, replace the need for so much stuff in your suitcase. And then, separate from that, I knew that I wanted to build a business in a way that I could feel good about. And not to knock any of the businesses I worked in, because I was lucky to work for many amazing industries. But as anybody knows who's worked in corporate, profit is definitely at the top list of priorities, and sustainability is usually a pillar somewhere off the side on a website, and it's not very much integrated throughout what they're doing. So I knew that from my work, specifically in retail, which was also my vertical in consulting, that there was so much that could be done better in that industry. And the Rana Plaza factory collapse, which was a very integral event in the fashion industry that happened in 2013, really shifted my perspective on how I wanted a business that had fair wages, responsible, safe labor, at the core of everything we were doing, as well as sustainability. So that kind of drove me to kind of reject the traditional fashion industry and start to think that there could be something better and I could be a part of that.
Amazing. And you touched on so many important points that we're going to unpack in this conversation today. And I guess that kind of leads organically into the next question. So, you identified a lot of these problematic industry challenges, and they really kind of inspired you to be a part of creating something a bit more intentional. How did you define those early impact goals early on for the business for you? Like, were they goals that were set out for yourself or your business, or both? Maybe you can walk us through that process.
Yeah, I would love to sit here and say I was that sophisticated from the get-go, but I was definitely not. I was just trying to find a manufacturer in Toronto who would actually make my product, which was in itself a massive challenge, which I'm happy to talk about the clothing industry a little bit more deeply. But I knew that sustainability, I had enough knowledge about sustainability to know that it just wasn't one thing. Like I couldn't just make a product with ethical labor or local labor and like problem solved. Like I knew there was so much more that went into it. So from the beginning, I had a really pretty big focus on the materials, because that's a huge component of the garment, as well as defining longevity, how much we wear it, sustainability. Around 2012, materials were like thought of like hemp and like was more popular. Like sustainability did not have the cachet it has now. And there was not that diversity of materials as well that were available. So that in itself, I think, was a barrier that we had to overcome, because there definitely wasn't that perception that sustainable clothing was stylish as well. And also, I think just like figuring out, like at the beginning, I was giving away a lot of my profits to charity because I wanted to help everybody. And then, we still do a lot of charitable support, but we have a much different model for it. So I think at the beginning, I was just trying to help everybody and make everything as best as possible, and as ethical as possible, which is lovely. But we can absolutely talk about this a little bit deeper. There's always a trade-off from a sustainability standpoint with sometimes profitability as well as scalability of the business when you're starting to integrate these things as well.
Yes, definitely. And I love that you kind of like, you had these like over ambitious ideas in the beginning, despite, the best intentions. And then through those over ambitious, plans, you kind of like walked it back a bit and then decided to kind of start with like what was actually realistic for your business to incorporate. What are some specific examples that kind of come to mind in that regard is like tangible takeaways and specific goals that are that you implemented. So I know that you mentioned, actually sourcing the right materials in the first place, but what might have been some of your first early tangible goals that you remember?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was really just building awareness for the product and the brand. I would say, in terms of goals, I was giving back a portion. I think it was 8%. I was obsessed with the number eight because it's like the infinity symbol turned sideways. I don't know why I thought that was so cool, but I did. And because our only garment, I only had one product and it was basically essentially an infinity scarf. I felt like, oh my God, everything's coming together in the universe. So, I was giving away like 8% of profits, which is like a lot of money to a different charity every month. And just the logistics of that were becoming like hard to manage, I would say. But my earliest goals were really to build a business that was going to feel good and that could get me out of my corporate career. Like I was still working part time in my job. Well, I was working full time, sorry, for the first 2 years of Encircled's existence, which is very common amongst entrepreneurs, depending on their risk profile and their backgrounds and their support and financial solvency and all that kind of stuff. Like not everybody feels comfortable just leaping and the net
Mhm.
appearing kind of thing. So that was a big goal of mine early on, was to figure out a way to build a sustainability into a business that had financial scalability so that it could support me, so that I could work in it full time, so that I could build it even bigger. So that was a big early goal for me for sure.
Okay, that's amazing. Thank you for walking us through that. And as I was sharing, earlier when I was pseudo introducing you, again, when I look to your greatest leadership strengths, at least from a distance, and because I've been following your journey for some time, in my view, your ability to productively and thoughtfully challenge fashion brands to also be more accountable when it comes to ethical and sustainable manufacturing is sometimes you will do, and sometimes publicly as well. Why is this important to you? And so this is like a big question to unpack. Why is this important to you? And do you think values-led founders should strive to carry a similar responsibility? And what are some examples of challenges or criticisms you may have experienced when doing this, if any, that maybe other founders should be aware of in the process if they're trying to find their voice to externally, practice accountability in these industries?
Hmm. Yeah, this is such a great question. It's something we do. It's something I do. It's something we actually do quite a bit on our Instagram account. If people go to Instagram at encircled underscore and look at some of our reels, my social coordinator does a lot of call outs for brands that are maybe greenwashing or perhaps behaving unethically, and doing sketchy things. As an example, there was I think I don't want to get it wrong with the Kardashians. I'm so bad with the Kardashian sisters and who they are, but one of them partnered with Boohoo, which is a notorious fashion brand, on a sustainability collection. It wasn't sustainable. Had like very recycled polyester might have been in the mix, maybe a little bit. But at the end of the day, it also was, consumptive. It's consumption driven, and it's like, sweatshop labor. Like it's like nothing about this is like sustainable in a holistic perspective, and it's not meant to last because it's super trendy and not well made. So we did a big call out on that. And I had posted on some of the pages of some of these creators as well. And I do feel like it is a responsibility of founders in this space to call it out, because who else is going to do it? I don't know. Like consumers are getting better and better at doing that. Like my heart gets a little warm when I go onto some of these pages and I see like people saying greenwashing alert and stuff like that. I'm like, yes, the customers are getting it. And they're getting smarter and smarter. But I think they get smarter and smarter through us educating and helping that cause along. So we try to use our social platform, not just obviously for generating revenue, but for educating. And that's a big proponent of something that we do on there. And so I do it a lot on Threads, because I actually don't run our Instagram, but I run our Threads. So I'm always on there calling people out. The Shein influencer trip, which was like a disaster of PR proportions for Shein, which is
Can
also
you
a fast
can
fashion
you
brand.
walk us through like quickly, just for a refresher, what I remember like vaguely, what was the Shein influencer fiasco just for our community,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of unpacking that?
Yeah, so Shein is like a very large fast fashion brand. They're going to hit, I think, they've gone from like they started around when we started, and now they're about, I think they're worth like I want to say 400 billion, but I feel like that's not
Yeah,
4
like they're like
billion.
the
They're,
biggest fast fashion company on the
yeah,
planet, I think. And they've only been around for what, a
yeah.
decade? I feel like you know more than I do.
Yeah, I'm gonna get their sales numbers wrong, but it's like monstrous. Like I think they're like 400 million, 4 billion in sales or something like that, or maybe even more. And they're about to IPO. Somebody just put that comment in. They're trying to IPO in the US, but they were having trouble because they have uh, documented slave labor in their supply chain and stuff like that. And the exchanges won't let brands IPO when they have sketchy things going on in their industry and stuff like that. So, yeah, basically they put together this influencer trip to show that they don't have sweatshops, and they had taken these group of influencers to like their head office, essentially to like one factory at their head office used for sampling or something that's like a prototype factory. It's not even a
Mhm.
real factory. You can anybody in the industry can tell because it's like so ridiculously unproductive. You wouldn't have like two sewing machines for a brand that turns out 30,000 styles a day. Like it just does not make sense. And then it became like all these influencers were posting these stories and they're like, look, it's not even a sweatshop. People aren't even sweating. And I was like, that's not a sweatshop. Like, I jumped on TikTok and did this whole recording about it. It kind of went semi-viral, and then we put it on Instagram and went viral. And really the whole point of that isn't to make me the hero or encircle the hero in that conversation. It's to show people that this is happening and this is something that they're trying to kind of push a fast one on you. And we as consumers or as advocates for ethical fashion need to speak up and say, this is not okay. And so it became a big point, I would say, of education. And a lot of people were very happy to know that this was happening because some people weren't even aware. So that's really what it comes down to is building awareness, I think, for the cause that you're passionate about as a business and helping educate, which, I don't think the world needs endless education in this area because it's surprising how far behind we are still in the fashion industry.
Yeah, truly, not only behind, but in some ways, not to be like a lights off versus lights on person for a second, but sometimes I wonder if we're getting worse, just
Yeah.
because of, especially looking at like the fast fashion world, like my understanding, and again, you know these statistics better than I do, of course, but my understanding is, the average fast fashion company drops like 52 seasons a year, right? So like one new
Yeah.
season a week. Is that correct, or it's something along those lines?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So essentially, they changed the model from 4 seasons or 5 seasons a year to 52 seasons. And actually, it's more like 365 seasons now because you've got brands like the largest ones dropping 30,000 styles a day. Like we at Encircled launch 2 products a month. Like the dichotomy between that is so big, right? Like, so slow fashion is like, we're really slow. Fast fashion is like the extreme end now. So yeah, I think that's the biggest problem when you look at fast fashion just generally is the volume of clothing and consumption that's driving. And the reality is most of those products are not made out of great materials and they're probably synthetic or oil based. So they're going to end up in a landfill and end up in our waterways. And a lot of them get dumped in developing countries and stuff like that. Like we don't need this many clothes. So there's just a lot of like bad things happening there. And the fact that like brands like Shein are growing so quickly is a little not great, right? Because like in one hand, we're supporting all these low fashion brands, and I think they have grown, but it's like the speed at which these fast fashion brands are growing is so outpacing all of us. It can be a little frustrating at times to see that for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm sure. And I think like a few years back, I saw in the headlines that there was a major retailer that was caught, they someone did a cost benefit analysis over there. And they're like, you know what? It's actually cheaper for us to burn the clothing we can't sell versus do anything else with it. Because they couldn't, I guess in specific situations, if they're not able to sell those 52 weeks a year of drops or whatever it is, this brand was caught literally destroying it instead, which is just wild to me. I don't know if you have any more like insight or thoughts on that, but just talking about like, yeah, what's the impact to the planet in that regard, right?
Yeah, I mean that I don't know which brand that was because I think it's happened a few times actually. One was
Yeah.
Burberry for sure, and one was H&M.
Mm.
But like there's all kinds of fashion crimes happening. Like H&M was caught. with their take back program, taking back people's clothing and saying they were going to like responsibly recycle it and then just dumping it in a landfill.
Yeah.
Like somebody had put like air tags or something on it and found it in the landfill. So yeah, all this greenwashing just does not help the case for other brands who are actually trying to be genuinely sustainable and do the best they can, because it gets lost. And then everybody thinks, all sustainability is just greenwashing, which is like moots the whole point. So yeah, I think that can be a little bit tricky, but I do believe there are more regulations coming into place, especially in Europe. And I think they're coming over to Canada, and we'll see an interesting test of the law in Canada soon with Lululemon, because they were just called out by, I think, a not-for-profit, and the Competition Bureau is looking into them. So it'll be interesting to see what comes from that.
Yeah. And I think they just kind of wrap up the point on accountability here. Again, like what you touched on education, right? Like that's really your default when you are holding brands accountable. Like you really present it, and your team presents it in this educational awareness way. Like when I'm following your posts on Encircled, there are very few times where I'm on Instagram and there are posts that make me stop scrolling and go, huh, okay, I didn't actually know that. I didn't know that that was part of the cost of subscribing to fast fashion, right? And so I think, the educational piece is such a powerful way for a brand, a leader, a founder on this call today, who is wondering, like, how can I use my voice? How can I lean into it to address these social or environmental issues that are important to me in my business? Education is always a great place to start. And I don't know what you think, but I believe it's also a low risk way to start. And if anyone is thinking like, well, I'm worried that, I'll be like accused of cancel culture or whatever narrative is in their head, or fear of speaking up. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, when we did a call out on a certain brand that was very popular with the movie, I was very nervous, like that they might sue us, because I knew they were like reaching out to other people and stuff like that. So there's a risk that like some big brand might get kicked off and send you a cease and desist. As we all know as founders, it's really difficult to like sue somebody for stuff like that. So usually they'll send you a cease and desist and ask you to stop talking about it. But you can talk in generalities. And I do think that like part of this is really about being authentic to you and your brand. So if it's not in your brand's DNA to act like this, then don't like do it. But for me, transparency and integrity are really big values, both at Encircled and with myself personally. So like even my own personal Instagram, I'm extremely transparent about what's going on, because I think, at least from my perspective, like social media is so fake that like if somebody can bring something real, it's just like it's such a breath of fresh air, right? And entrepreneurship is so hard, and nobody freaking talks about that. They just go on and be like, beach on a laptop, entrepreneur lifestyle. Whereas like I saw a lady, I was just on a beach vacation and I did not have my laptop on the beach, thank God. But this lady beside me did, and she was like, the whole day she was like so stressed out. You could just see her, and I'm like, that is not the entrepreneur lifestyle. But like somebody might like take a picture and then make it look so good. So I do feel like it's acting in your integrity and what resonates with you, and in terms of holding other brands accountable. But I do think there's a lot of information that's not passed along to consumers, and a lot of people just don't know until they know. So like the more you can educate on stuff like fast fashion and sustainability, I think the better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So I want to segue into something sort of related, and it kind of ties into the next question as well, but you've got me thinking of this next important point. Some of the challenges that come with being, so if you're an impact focused brand and you're trying to do things that are aligned with your ethical, values within your company, that comes at a premium cost, right? Like your clothing is probably much more expensive to manufacture than Shane, for example, for many different reasons. How do you deal with, educating people on why your top or pants are like $150 and why it's worth the investment? And then also like on the flip side, I'm sure you deal with criticisms at the same time. Like, why are these pants $150? What is that process like for you, or that challenge for you to navigate?
Oh, it's like a little triggering.
Sorry.
To be honest. No,
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'll answer the question, but yeah, like we do a little bit of Facebook advertising and stuff like that. And I mean, that's the number one comment is like, are you guys insane? Why would you charge $178 for sweatpants? Like, have you lost your mind? Like stuff like that. Or like, is your founder out on a yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean? That's my favorite one because I'm like, no, I live in Toronto, like in a rental.
You should do like
You
a quick
know,
like mean tweets. You know, when Jimmy Kimmel reads like mean tweets or celebrities, like you should do
yes,
your version of that when people are like, "Oh, it must be nice that Christy founder's on a yacht because she's selling
I know.
$170 pants," and it's just like you sad reading it. Like, no, that's just not my
Just
reality.
driving my Kia in Toronto.
Yeah.
Great car though. Yeah, so I think yes, that's the number one thing because yes, there's a huge price disparity if you compare us versus H&M. If you compare us versus Lululemon, there's not as big of a price discrepancy. But the problem is that in the consumer mind, they don't know us as a brand. So they're like, who the heck are these people thinking they can charge so much? Because we don't have the brand power of like a Lululemon or a Vuori or somebody like that, or Alo Yoga. So like those brands are priced fairly similarly, but they're a much bigger brand. They have a lot more cachet, I guess, and celebrity power and credibility in some ways, which is ironic. So I think there's this like weird mentality that like small brands should be cheaper, which doesn't make any sense from a math standpoint because everything is more expensive for us because we have no scale. And this is where I feel like a lot of founders get trapped up because they hear customer feedback on pricing and they're like, well, I should just drop my prices, like because I'm never going to sell anything at this price point. But then they drop the prices and then they're not making any money, then they can't pay themselves,
Right.
or they're paying themselves like minimum wage or something in the business and they're working all the time. So it's like this vicious cycle. And I find it tends to happen a lot to founders in the purpose driven space because a lot of us just really are passionate about purpose. So we'll often put our own well being and financial well being to the side and focus on that. So it's been a journey for me for sure because like there's a big abundance scarcity mindset that happens with that. And don't get me wrong, it's an absolute privilege to be able to buy a pair of sweatpants for $178. However, like people are still wearing our sweatpants that they bought 8 years ago. They have not fallen apart. They've washed and worn them hundreds and hundreds of times. Like these are not throwaway pants. So when you start thinking about things on a cost per wear basis, especially in the slow fashion industry, that's where I feel like you can start to see a lot of the value. So we do talk about that a lot on social. We have done price breakdowns where we break down the exact cost that goes into specifically those sweatpants because we're not only like making them in Toronto, we're knitting and dyeing the fabric in Toronto. So like
Wow.
every single piece is like 20 to 30 times more expensive. And we're using like super premium materials, like sustainable luxury materials that you don't find at Lululemon, quite frankly. So there is cost along the way, which is why I think if you're going to be in product-based business in the purpose-driven and integrate sustainability or impact into your business model, you have to know your financials really well. Your cost of goods sold, like, is so, so important. So many brands, when I do coaching and consulting, they're pricing themselves wrong,
Mhm.
which just like down the line, if your gross margin is too low, then everything starts to get hit at the bottom. So we need to be more confident as founders to charge what we charge and really stand by it and say, this is what it costs and this is why. And it's not for everybody, and that's okay. Or maybe somebody invests in a t-shirt or something like that at your brand, and you have that kind of offering where it's a little bit more of an accessible price point so that they can try your quality and kind of see that difference. But we also try and do other things, like we have a resale site now where people can buy or sell gently loved and circled items. We have sample sales periodically where it's like perfectly imperfect items from our manufacturing, and those can be up to 60% off retail. So there are opportunities to try our brand and get into it and kind of experience what quality
I
clothing
love
feels
that.
like again, which is hard, right? Because like quality clothing is hard to find
Yeah.
personally in the industry.
No, I agree. And on just like a personal note, when I bought a few of your pieces, uh, and a couple years back during the pandemic, and I still live in them around the house, and like they look brand new to this day. There's no
Yay.
pilling or anything like that. And I think like, again, like it just kind of comes back to you get what you pay for, right? When you're investing in the right materials. And so one of the the biggest takeaways I'm taking from this question basically is as founders who are listening here, business owners, it's really important, number one, to just make sure you understand your costs, right? Really dissect your cost of goods sold. Okay, great. Now you know your costs. Now, what is the cost of doing business right that is aligned with your values of the company, right? And the ethics of the company as well, and making sure that you're charging appropriately beyond that cost. And we run into that teas, like our tea is $22. Like, I'm sorry, if we're on a shelf next to Lipton and Red Rose and people have never heard of us, we're going to get laughed at, right? They're gonna be like, like never in a million years would I buy a $22 package of tea when I could get this like $4.99, brand. And so the next part of that I'm hearing is really important is the educational piece, right? So whether it's like within your marketing, on your website, social media, and so on, actually educating consumers, about a lot of the problematic challenges in the industry and how it's become important to your company to try to raise that awareness and do better and educate, appropriately. And then lastly, transparency in the process. And I think that is something you touched on beautifully, is like, okay, you're also being transparent as like why this garment costs as much money, like what goes into it and what goes into doing all of those things in a way that's aligned, with your business goals. So that's great. I think those are very practical, takeaways for people that are listening today who are looking to kind of refine how to do business better, starting from the ground up with their products and services. Amazing. So into our next question, it kind of ties into the last one a little bit. So we're talking about people who might troll your brand and being like, why are these sweatpants like $178? What about on the flip side? I don't know about you, but sometimes I get customers that almost put us on a pedestal who expect us to just be perfect at everything. And I remember one time I was covering for our customer service support person who was off. So I was in the inbox just reading the tickets coming in. And one of them was an angry customer who said, oh, for a company that preaches biodegradable packaging, I'm so upset that my package came in a box with a shipping label that I'm certain is not compostable. Do better. And on one hand, because I'm the owner of the business, I can't help but take it a little bit personally, and I start spiraling and I start researching like, oh yeah, I should do better. Like, how do I get compostable shipping labels? And then, in the process of it, I was like, wait, I just have to ship, like, the shipping and the emissions that might come from actually sourcing these in the first place is its own separate thing to unpack. But nonetheless, being put on that pedestal of kind of being forced, like not being forced, but being told like, do better, do better. Do you ever run into that? And I see it with other brands as well that are values led in the comment section, right, on Instagram, where it's like, oh, I was going to try you, but not anymore because you don't package in 100% plastic free packaging or whatever the case might be.
Yeah, well, I'm sure as well as a lot of founders on this call, it's impossible to be 100% perfect, perfectly sustainable. And also something like that doesn't exist, especially in fashion. Like, there is no perfect sustainable fiber that I've found ever. Like there's, sustainability for sure in fashion is a continuum. Like there can be materials that are better, that are worse, but then it depends on how they're processed, where they're made, are they certified? Like there's so many factors that go into it. It's like too complex almost in many ways to explain to customers. But I would say like the biggest thing we see is that, yes, definitely, like I would say with clothing, a lot of us are used to synthetic fibers. So like the polyester spandex or the nylon spandex, and you can pretty much do anything to that and it's going to be okay. So you can throw in the washing machine with 1,000 zippered products. You can put it into that dryer, put it on high, and it'll probably be fine. In the long run, that's not good because it's melting the spandex, so it's going to weaken it, but it looks perceivably fine when it comes out of the dryer. And I would say, like, generally, most of our products perform like that, but like certain more delicate fibers, like we have a t-shirt made out of, if there's cotton in something, it has a higher tendency typically to pill and stuff like that. So our instructions are generally to like hang it to dry, which isn't that ridiculous. It's also really great for your clothing to do that anyways, because it stays more wrinkle free, it uses less energy. But somebody might throw it into the washing machine with some zippers and whatever, and then it starts to like it snags or something. Or somebody's had a product for 2 years and they catch it on something and it gets a hole in it. And they email us and we're like, well, you've had it for 2 years. We can't really like guarantee that it's going to last forever. Like that's just like really difficult to manage. So yeah, it is about education because we do try and do a lot of education in our follow-up emails and stuff like that in our post-purchase sequence so that people know this is how to best care for your fabrics for longevity. Hang it to dry, wash on gentle, use like low impact detergent, like stuff like that. We try to make that part of the process with people, but it's hard because you have big businesses. Like if somebody emails, like, I'm trying to think of an example of a brand, but like Amazon's pretty good at dealing with damages and they're just like, just throw it out. Who cares?
Yeah.
So like we're getting set up a little bit by bigger brands allowing that behavior to happen, which is not really realistic for a small business to refund a customer 2 years later for something. So I do think it's about having those challenging conversations with customers. I personally don't work in customer service anymore, and I don't recommend, I always recommend founders that that's like the first thing
Stay
you
out.
hire out. Yeah, we're way too emotional to be in there. Like, it is not a good situation. And I'm like the worst person at customer service in my company, probably. So, but I do feel like it is good to stay connected to the feedback that's coming through customer service. And I do watch every review and every piece of feedback, good, bad, or otherwise, to see. But yeah, it is tough, like, because consumer expectations are like always being propped up by somebody else, and then you're trying to match it. But again, small businesses, we just can't do it.
No, you can't. And yeah, it's so easy for founders again to kind of bring it back to the beginning, like to take it personally. So it's important to like keep a pulse on the feedback, right? And kind of take from it what you will, what's applicable, and no matter how hard it can be sometimes, try not to internalize it too much as well. And most importantly, be able to like educate people on why you're not able to always meet all expectations across the board. The example that you just gave with Amazon, like, yeah, sure, they'll refund pretty much anything, no questions asked. But make no mistake, like there are a lot of small businesses that also sell on Amazon, and like that's coming out of their pocket at the end of the day. It's not coming out of Amazon's,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Sure.
And I think a lot of consumers don't realize that. So another shared experience that we both have is being in the dragon's den. So being in front of all those lovely TV investors. And so my experience was filled with unexpectedly a great deal of criticism from some of the traditional investors because I chose because we're an impact focused brand. And we were specifically criticized actually for building the Founders Fund community. They labeled me as unfocused and potentially irresponsible for not only focusing on teas, which also, like, side note, is a bit ironic because I would love to ask them how many businesses do they all have like a piece of ownership of combined. It's probably hundreds. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so I know that you have an experience in the Dragon's Den as well. What was your experience like, especially specifically again as an impact driven brand? Were there any similarities? Did you face any challenges? Yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, so different to you, my episode never aired, so
I
nobody's
remember.
gonna find it
Thank you
on
for
the
sharing that
internet.
with me. Yeah.
So I've watched your episode and I thought you were amazing on it. Amanda was on there with you, right?
And it
I
was
think.
too. And I somehow
Yeah,
kept, I don't know how I kept so cool most of the time.
so cool.
I think it was like out of body at a certain point because you have well, I mean, maybe not for you, but for me, like growing up watching Dragon's Den, like I had them on a pedestal a little bit and I'd manifested and worked so hard to get on the show, only to end up on the show and be torn down by pretty much every investor. It was like expectations versus reality were so different. And yeah, I think
Yeah.
I was out of body at a certain point and just like disassociated.
Yeah, I mean, you were so stoic. I was very impressed. I probably would have cried. But I didn't cry on the show recording. I cried after in the interview that they do after. I like lost my mind. But it never aired. Maybe that footage will go on live sometime because that would be nice. I'd like the press. But yeah, my experience was a little bit different. So this was a while ago. I think we filmed in 2015. So it was a different set of dragons than you
Yeah.
had. There was a few of them still on there. There was Jim Treliving, Michelle Romano was on there, the founder of Joe Fresh was on there, and then there was an investment banker, and I think Manjeet was on there. I believe I'm getting her name right. She owns the brewery.
Yes.
Yeah, so there was those five. So yeah, it was an interesting experience. A lot of hype to get up to it, and then you record a long time. And the one thing is like I knew my numbers and I knew I had a great valuation. So I did get complimented on that for being like realistic. So I think that's important to note for any founders going in to pitch for investment, that having a good valuation. And the way I found that, quite honestly, was a calculator online and then doing a little bit of a gut check with myself. So that was like something they were really proud of, and they were actually pretty easy on me. The hardest person was the founder of Joe Fresh. He did not like
Yeah.
my style. He did not like my business model. He did not like the fact that I was making in Canada. So I actually ended up getting two offers from both four of them. Two of them teamed up with offers. And the only offer I didn't get was from him. He was extremely unpleased with my business and thought my designs were messy, as to how he described it. Your collection is
Well,
messy.
and you exactly what I was trying to, which the direction I was hoping you'd kind of go down. Like, yeah, one of your investors, because I remember one of the dragons, because we had a conversation, I think a couple years ago about your experience high level. But yeah, I remember it being the founder of Joe Fresh. And I thought like, wow, that's like a completely different values set of a company. Of course, there's going to
Mhm.
be some clash and mishmash. Yeah, so I'm glad that you unpacked that a little bit, because what the point I want to make to our community here is not everyone's going to love what you do or going to be values aligned in what you do. And so, yeah, what are some other takeaways that you have from that experience overall?
Yeah, it crushed my spirit a little bit with him rejecting me, I think, because I had also been rejected, I would say, by the local Toronto fashion community prior to that to be in an incubator program. So I started to think, like, is this a real business? Because nobody in the fashion industry seems to like me. And I think what they didn't like about my business is that I'm so practical. Like, I'm designing products to replace trends, essentially. So I think that was like kind of the whole fashion industry operates on trends. Like, they want us to buy more. So I think I was doing the opposite, and that's like very hard for fashion industry people to kind of consume. But I guess the other takeaway was that, um, I had a good valuation. I went away from that with two deals. I centered on a deal. It totally fell apart in due diligence, never got the money. I signed a lease assuming I would get the money, so never do that. And hired an employee. Also, don't do that before you get the money. But I used that information to, prepare my pitch, make it better, and go to new investors. And I ended up getting an investor shortly thereafter, who's an impact-driven investor in Toronto, and they just reinvested with us last year, so they've been a long-term partner, and I got a great valuation for it. So I think you're going to get a lot of no's, as you know, and so you just got to pick up the pieces and carry on. That's all you
Yeah,
can do.
and let's like unpack that part for a moment, because we're actually going to go into a bit more into our panel as well. This, are like really kind of leaning into the fact that you're going to hear a lot of no's in your entrepreneurial journey, and you're especially going to hear no's if people don't get what you're doing, the people that you're trying to, potentially raise capital from or partner with, or whatever it might look like. In fact, Bobby Reset, who's going to be on the panel shortly, she had heard 170 no's from investors before she started to make traction, finding the right values aligned investors to close their raise of 8.4 million, which is remarkable. But I don't know if I have it in me to hear 170 no's. All transparency, and you talked about after your Dragon's Den experience, you cried after the show. I don't share this often, but after the show, I had a full on panic attack and that was the first panic attack I've ever had in my life. And I was having a difficult time reconciling with, again, having put these people on a pedestal and really hoping to be seen and understood and connect with them, but only to be torn apart. It was really difficult to come back from that, if I'm being totally honest. So what's your advice and takeaway to our founders today that might face rejection, for being misunderstood, lack of values alignment, and people that they're connecting with, and otherwise, like, how do you approach it?
I mean, first of all, to Bobby, getting 170 no's and keeping going is like amazing, and congrats on that raise. That's phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, gosh, there's so many things that go wrong in starting a business and so many things that go right. It's like that resiliency as a founder. And I think for you, Sheena, sharing about that panic attack is so important because it helps other founders know that they're not alone. And I'm not afraid to cry in business. I know people think that's like stupid, but if I'm gonna cry, like after I found out I didn't get the deal for the Dragons Den and I signed a lease and hired an employee, I literally cried on the floor of my new office. I had no furniture. And I was like, I am screwed. What am I going to do? And I let myself feel those emotions because I think we're human. We got to let ourselves process that. And then, like I said, you just pick yourself back up again. And not one person's opinion doesn't mean the world. That's just one person. So, I remember very early on, a dragon who's no longer on the show, his associate was like talking to me about my business. And he's like, your business is stupid. It should be made in Bangladesh. Like nobody's going to buy made in Canada clothing. And you're going to hear all these negative opinions, but it's important to surround yourself with people who believe in you. That's why I think groups like Founders Fund are really important. Getting a network of other entrepreneurs who you can connect with, getting some biz besties who you can go to and talk to. I remember calling one of my best friends at that time, who's also an entrepreneur, and she's like, it'll be okay, don't worry. Just having somebody in your corner, I think, can help you get through those difficult moments. You're never gonna live life without rejection. And I think if you do, I think you're actually missing something, because you can grow a lot of strength from rejection as well.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. So yeah, to kind of recap that for practical takeaways, like number one, honor your feelings. Like, yeah, if you need to cry it out, go cry it out. Like if you need to, like scream, like whatever it is, like do the thing to honor the feelings that are happening to you in that moment, because they're real. Like don't compartmentalize that. Don't brush it under the rug. Like honor that for what it is. And then secondly, lean into the community that understands you, right? Like the other entrepreneurs you might know, mentors, family who, understand and support, what you're doing, communities like this. And like, this is what we hear time and time again from, women within our community, is that, they're constantly underestimated out there in various ways. And the subconscious bias that they, let alone like the full blatant, conscious bias, but the subconscious bias where, they're being criticized without even the person realizing that they're criticizing them in the first place, right? And just, being able to recognize that for what it is, and then, lean into people who understand and still get the vision and support you along the way, and to rally for you to keep going. I love that. So we're going to wrap up with a couple more, maybe more rapid fire type questions here, because there's so many more that I wanted to get to today, but I love where we're going with this conversation. Do you find that balancing purpose alongside having profit goals and operation goals can feel like a luxury at times? And what I mean by that is, like, especially in this, I don't know about you, Christy, but in this post-pandemic economy right now, like as a founder myself, I feel like I'm just cutting my teeth trying to make every dollar count and stretch as far as possible. And so to make sure I'm operating so under resourced with maximum efficiencies, and then layer on, the responsibility of balancing our purpose goals. Like sometimes it feels like a luxury because I don't feel like I have the time to do that as much as I want to. And it's incredibly important to do that consistently. Do you feel similar? Do you not? Do you have a strategy so that it doesn't feel that way for you? What would be kind of your takeaway to founders who maybe are experiencing that challenge?
It's tough, right? Because at the end of the day, you're running a business, and, I have employees who need to get paid. So there are very important business goals that we have to adhere to. So it's like that push pull. Like you're like, I want to be a business, but I want to be sustainable. So like you're trying to find that balance. So I think we're always trying to have some sort of goal in our quarter where we are focusing on something around sustainability. And I do feel like B Corp helps with that a lot, because they give a framework for looking at where we can improve the most. And for us, like in the last couple of years, it's been like reducing the amount of rayon from bamboo we've been using in our collection, and switching to a more sustainable fabric that lyocell. And or like last year. Oh my God, it feels like so. We launched a resale site in April of 2023. So that was a big goal, was to improve circularity, not only amongst our customers, but also amongst ourselves. When we have like last little pieces, we want to move off our site and give them an opportunity for a new home. So, and we did mystery boxes in December, and that was a huge hit with our customers. And that was largely like pieces, that, we'd had kind of like brand new pieces, but like, they're so jumbled in sizing, it's hard to sell them on the website. They did really well in mystery boxes, and people love the surprises. So we're always trying to do some initiative in the quarter. And right now we're really looking at like our cutting and our waste, and like brainstorming more accessories that can be truly upcycled from materials we're already using in our collection, so that we move towards a goal of being more, I think zero waste in fashion is very unrealistic, but producing less waste. So that framework of B Corp, I think, helps a lot to keep us structured when looking at these things. But yeah, it is a tough balance, because being a sustainable and ethical business is, there's layers of cost, that plus layers of cost of the increase of cost during the pandemic and everything that's happened over the last few years. Inflation is not, businesses are not immune to inflation either. So it is that balance for sure.
Yeah, it is definitely that balance. And I'm really happy you brought up B Corp. And I just linked the B Corp assessment in the chat box there, because I agree with you. Their initial assessment is so accessible for any founder at any stage in their business to just take a few minutes, input some data about how they're doing business. And then B Corp will essentially give you like, okay, here's where you rank. Here are some tangible ways. Some are low lift. Some are bigger, audacious things that might require more long-term thought and output. But here's a framework to help you do a little bit better over time, progress over perfection, right? So I'm glad that you brought up that resource. So two last questions. Your entrepreneurial journey has been, incredible and so dynamic, and it led you to, in recent years, launching coaching services for e-commerce, specifically purpose-driven product brands. What led to this decision for you, and how can people learn more about it? Because I think this is also a really important, service that we're starting to see a little bit more accessibility towards for founders, for purpose-driven founders and brands.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually had it for quite a while. So I've had it for
My
almost
apologies. I thought it
10
was the
years.
last
No,
couple of
it's totally
years.
fine.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
I probably never talk about it. I'm really bad at self-promotion, like most founders. So yeah, I started it when I quit my full-time job because I didn't have any income. I wasn't pulling any income out of Encircled. So I thought I'll just do consulting for friends on the side, who need consulting, because I came from a consulting background. And then it kind of morphed into more business coaching and mentoring, as well as I have a podcast called the E-commerce Maven podcast, where I talk about real strategies for growing your online store. I have some courses. I launched a group coaching program last year to make it more accessible for people who are early stage in their business to kind of get that resourcing and that coaching and that content and that training and that community as well. And then I also do private coaching and some mentoring with a mentor called Marie Forleo, who has a business, and she has B School as well as Time Genius program. So I've worked with her for almost 8 years as well. So yeah, I have a breadth of things that I do. It's a very small portion of my time. I love it though. It brings me a lot of joy, because I remember how stuck I was when I was starting a business and there were not nearly the resources. And I'm sure it was similar for you. You couldn't just go on Upwork and hire somebody to do this. It wasn't as accessible as it is now. So I remember just spinning my wheels a lot. So my goal is to help entrepreneurs not spin their wheels and get them on a path of profitability and growth. And I stood exactly in their shoes. And I think just having that support, I think, is incredible. I would love to get a coach who's a few steps ahead of me, because I think they know exactly where I've been and they can relate to everything I'm going through. So I think if you can't find a coach, you can even get a mentor. There's some great mentorship programs. I know you have some mentoring, I think, in your program. There's also the Forum, which is an amazing not-for-profit in Canada who does mentoring as well. Just having somebody in your corner, I think, can help. And I find with businesses, that coaching aspect is really important, because a lot of us are stuck in our own heads. We know exactly what we need to do. We just start getting frozen because we just worry that it's the wrong choice, or maybe we're overwhelmed and we have too much on the go. We need a system to prioritize it or whatever. So just getting somebody to give you a little bit of a push to get over that hump, I think, can be really productive. So yeah, people can check out the podcast. It's been a little bit dormant for the last little while because I've been quite busy with Encircled, but we'll be bringing it back in the spring and having some new guests on and stuff like that. So it's definitely a passion project of mine, because I want to help as many founders as I can.
I love that. And I've listened to a few of those episodes in the past, and it's a gold mine. There's some really practical takeaways for businesses. And I think that's the thing that many of us can struggle with, is being that visionary founder that has all these best intentions and like has these things that are really important to them to implement meaningfully and authentically in their business. But the reality is you don't have a business long term if you're not continuously focused on the bottom line and operational efficiencies and so on. And so yeah, I think you do a great job of, helping founders find that balance and what that might look like for them individually. So the final question, Christy, thank you. So knowing what you know now, after all these years and everything you've been through, from day one, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed Christy on the path of just launching Encircle to where you're at today, what is one piece of advice you would give to yourself back then to Christy in those early days when you first started Encircled?
This is such a good question, and I kind of wish I opened the PDF before this call to think about it a little bit more. But I'll say the first thing that comes to my mind, and it's going to be so cheesy, I think, but just believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe in what you're doing, like honestly, nobody else is going to do that. And I know believing in yourself is a little trite or cliche or something like that. You have to truly believe in the idea and have that passion and purpose. And because, like we talked about, so many things are going to be thrown your way. Like you're going to make a batch of leggings with the wrong fabric or the wrong material labels in them and have to do something with that. Or somebody's going to ship a $2,000 order to the wrong customer. Like there's going to be stuff that happens. And you have to build that resiliency as a founder to be able to get through it. And just know that it's all part of the journey. So there's not really an end destination. I guess selling your business is an end destination with entrepreneurship, but try to find some learnings and some joy in that journey that you're going through and take it day by day and just keep going. That's the best thing I think with like most founders is like, just keep going, just keep moving forward just a little bit, even each day. And you'll
Not cheesy at
get
all,
where you
and
want to go.
so well said, and I'm sure resonates with so many people, at this event today. So Christy, thank you so much for your time and joining our community today for this event. We really, really appreciate it. And we're going to move on to the next part of our event today. And just before we do that, just as a quick reminder, again, we really are encouraging you to share your takeaways, any inspirations or learnings on social media. You can tag the Founders Fund and BDC so that we can also reshare that to our broader community. And like I said, to make it fun, we're going to be doing a draw at random to receive a $100 gift card to Encircled and also a $100 gift card to Stacy Martin Lifestyle. So with that, I'm excited to bring Brooke onto our virtual stage. Brooke has been a longtime moderator and Founders Fund partner for us here at Founders Fund, and she manages BDC Academy's executive learning programs, providing exclusive training for ambitious and growing companies all across the country. Brooke is committed to ensuring all entrepreneurs have confidence to achieve their company's strategic vision by continually developing their leadership and management skills. Welcome, Brooke.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. This has been such a wonderful journey together. I think it's been, God, it has been a couple years now, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a couple years, but there's no one else well, I shouldn't say there's no one else, but you're top of our list of moderators because you're just so great at what you do. And I think it's such an underrated craft that is sometimes overlooked, and you really weave together people's stories and lessons and learnings together in such a cohesive way. So we're always excited when you say yes. So thank you for always saying yes.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me back. So I am delighted to be here. I think we've got a couple other guests. I'm going to invite them to turn on their camera if they're with us now. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our panel today. So the theme for today's panel, as you would have heard, is Beyond Profit, Exploring the Worth of Impact. And so joining me today, you can see them on screen right now. We have Stacy Martin. She's the founder and fashion designer, a mother who started her career as a professional performing artist. Leading with sustainability and impact in mind, she champions diversity, self-love, and empowerment for women, aiming to redefine the fashion industry's norms. Committed to creating a culture that transforms how fashion is perceived and operated, Stacey inspires individuals to prioritize what truly matters, from overcoming failure to channeling your purpose, to finding the right people for guidance and raising money during a pandemic. Oh, Stacey, that's a lot. Her entrepreneurial journey is one that is filled with growth, strength, and resilience, and we are so excited to hear about that today. Also joining us is Amanda Baker. She's the founder and lead strategist of Bake Good Impact Agency, an advocate for socially responsible businesses. Amanda's got over a decade of experience working with impact agencies, benefit corporations, and purpose-driven brands. Her work at Baked Good Impact focuses on building long-term, low-resource, and measurable impact through designing business operating policies, procedures, and community partnerships that support targeted impact goals. Amanda, it is lovely to be on this panel with you, my friend. We also have Bobby Reset. She's the founder and CEO of Virtual Gurus, an award-winning Métis Cree entrepreneur with an unmatched ability to drive change and empower historically underrepresented communities through equitable remote work opportunities. Virtual Gurus is North America's largest talent place platform that harnesses the power of machine learning to match freelancers with businesses of all sizes. Robbie is also the first Indigenous woman to close a Series A funding, closed at $8.4 million. Congratulations. And also joining us, and it's lovely to see you again, Holly. Holly Ajukite is a Cree Saltu entrepreneur and director of Futurepreneurs Indigenous Entrepreneur Startup Program, the IESP. She's committed to empowering Indigenous youth in sustainable entrepreneurship nationwide. With a background in Indigenous entrepreneurship and youth advocacy, she brings expertise aiming to foster economic resilience in Indigenous communities while prioritizing sustainability and social impact. And I have to say, I am so delighted to have the four of you with me today. I have been following and know many of you, and certainly admire all of your work, and I am really excited about our conversation. So what I want to do today is I'm going to start off with a focus talking to Bobby and Stacy to start, because we want to hear a little bit more about your entrepreneurial journey. So if you could walk us through what led you to start your business. We're talking about impact businesses, and did that play a role in the early years?
You want me to start?
Stacy, the floor is yours.
My journey was a little bit different than most because I could kind of feel like I started throughout high school. It was in high school. I was in high school. I didn't know what I was going to be at naturally right after high school. And so at 17 years old, I was a competitive dancer. I used to dance a lot competitively, and I went to be a dancer first. So I danced at Wonderland. I danced on cruise ships. And by 19 years old, I was dancing on Broadway. The difference that I found was that I was predominantly the only Black woman as a dancer on Broadway and on many of the shows that I was doing. And so my body type was different than most women that I would see. So I started to look at the women who were living in New York City when I was dancing in New York City on Broadway, and I would see that they looked uncomfortable in their really good looking fashion clothes, but I was super comfortable in my dancer clothes. And I thought, how can I blend these two things together? And that's when I decided to build my brand. I thought of one of the things that was missing was that a lot of the fashion clothing were made out of materials that were polyester, not great for the environment. They didn't allow your body to breathe or move. So my whole mission into sustainability wasn't something that I was thought out as being a sustainable leader. It was kind of done by a need that was missing in the market, that gap between fitness and fashion clothing, and that gap also with making clothing that allowed your body to feel good, for you to move through and really go towards what matters most in your life. So that's where I started. And then after I started to research how polluting the fashion industry is, how much we can make a change, I thought I absolutely have to keep this company as much as I can eco-conscious, as much as I can having zero waste in the fashion industry, and as much as I can helping leaders that look like me or leaders who have other like limitations, I would say, to really grow their brands. So that's kind of where I began and started and kind of where it is today.
Oh, wow, that is so amazing. What I really love about this is you took something you were super passionate about and then realized while you were there that there was other things going on. So you're observing, you're seeing, okay, you look great, but you are super uncomfortable. I am comfortable and I still look great. And how do we put these two things together?
Exactly, exactly. That's it. And I thought there wasn't a lot of brands back there that put those two things together. We used to hear suffer for fashion. That was kind of like a thing that you would hear. You got to suffer for fashion. And I thought, why do we have to suffer for fashion? But then dance clothes were always so sloppy. Like they felt great to wear, but they weren't great looking. So I was like, how can we put these two things together? And I think a lot of times when I think of founders, they ask me like, Stacey, where did you start? How did you start? How can you help me? I said, always look at whatever the gap is in the industry. What are you doing in your life that you feel can help others? And I think by doing that and by like living through that is where you can build some of the best businesses.
Oh, I love that. We're going to pin
Mhm.
that thought because we're going to come back to that one later.
Yeah.
Bobby, tell us your origin story. How did you get started with Virtual Gurus?
That's amazing, Stacey. I really appreciate what you have to say because I built Virtual Gurus on a gap that was also in the industry, and it always feels so good and humbles me to hear when other founders started their story based on that as well. So I appreciate that. Virtual Gurus was started in 2016. I worked in oil and gas. I was a little bit of, my mom would call me a gypsy. I traveled all over the world, hitchhiked. I had long dreads, sat on the side of a mountain, playing drums, and just enjoying the hippie life. And it was amazing. But then I ended up getting a job in Calgary at an oil and gas company, and I worked my way up into a high angle safety foreman. And I thought that this was going to be great. I thought it was awesome. But with administration as my background, I knew I needed to find something better. But then the layoffs happened. And so I was one of the 50,000 folks in Calgary that were laid off that time. And because administration was my background, I was trying to look for work. So I was running all over looking for work. 10 months later, my employment insurance was running out. Nobody would give me a job. And I knew that my resume was hitting the bottom of the trash cans. Like I just knew it. Like, I mean, let's be real. Administration, I'm not exactly the Donna from Suits style look. Indigenous, tattoos, queer, and people were just not going to give me the job. And so I started seeing gig economy. And that's when I signed up for companies who are actually now our competitors and off-sourced myself as a virtual administrative assistant. And during that time, I'd realized that I had to bid as low as $2 an hour for people from Upwork just to get a job. And I was thinking, there's got to be another way. And so I created Virtual Gurus just to create a job for myself because nobody would give me a job. And so I worked for 12-hour days at a coffee shop and then worked in the evenings doing the administrative work, from cold calling people on Kijiji to all of that. Threw up a splash page, taught myself how to do it, built it all in Excel sheets, and then I bootstrapped it to about 1.8 million in revenue before I realized that I could actually build a platform to provide work to others that have been told no, like me. And so then I started raising money, and then that's kind of where it all came from. So now, 6 years later, it's kind of built into this massive platform that it's turned into being one of the largest impact talent place platforms, because a lot of people didn't do that. They didn't focus on the impact side of it. Where now we have a mandate of the certain type of people we hire that are in the platform. So it's kind of just a story that was built on my own story, and I'm happy that it's set like wildfire. So it's good.
Bobby, that is so relatable. The idea of creating the job for yourself, but also the fact that you're so intentional about bringing others with you on that journey. And so I want to ask you a question, because there's a piece of it. You sort of started off with this, drumming on the side of a mountain. So I want to use that. There's an expression, having your head in the clouds, but there's also another expression about having your feet on the ground. And so how have you been able to sort of balance those two things of continuing to be visionary but also being really tactical? You talked a little bit about sort of doing it yourself, but there was obviously huge skill sets that you needed to learn and be able to master or to bring on. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you've balanced those two?
I think it would, if I could say it would really depend on, and also be a little bit probably based on my stubbornness, um, and also just based on that I'm one of those people where I'll think big no matter what. I've been thinking big since I was able to, and I've always been a big thinker and a dreamer, and for me is one of the number one things that makes me even think bigger is when you tell me I can't do it. Then it's like, you know what? No way, man. I'm gonna do this, and you can't stop me. Nobody can. So that kind of keeps me grounded. And I hate to say it's maybe certain things where when somebody tells you you can't do it, to me, it's more of a, I don't just turn around and say, oh, okay, thanks. I'm out of here. I actually turn around and say, wait a minute, I can do this. And there's nobody better to do it than me. And how can I do this? And then my stubbornness kicks in and then I have to do it. And when I think I'm trying to prove everybody else wrong, it's really about me trying to prove myself right and to set those goals for myself that I've never had when I was younger, and to set that next stage. I'm very goal driven. And so I found out that that's what takes me along those clouds is what's the next goal? What's the next goal? What's the next goal? So I think it works differently for everybody else for sure, but I think that's helped a lot.
I really like that. And I'm seeing in Sheena wrote in, yes, stubbornness is relatable. Being told no can be fuel. Stacey, before I come to you, Bobby, have you found that you are always sort of fueled by that? Or have you found that, sort of maybe your values or your vision, there are some things that someone says, no, you can't do that. And you're like, well, I didn't want to anyways.
Yeah. No, I never have been. I was actually very shy. I am, contrary to what maybe some might think, but I'm I'm very introverted and a very shy person. When I started getting all those no's of the 170 no's when I was raising money, and I'm still raising money now, but the hardest part was not letting it get me down and not letting it hurt me and not letting it ruin my momentum and not letting it ruin who I am and what I knew I could be. So essentially, like, entrepreneurship has turned into medicine for me because I was able to turn that around and come out of my shell and be a different person and really focus on what I needed to do different and really focus on that and be resilient. So in retrospect, I am happy about the hard times of the no's that came forward from that.
Thank you for sharing that. Stacey, for yourself, we're talking about this balance of being a visionary and also being really pragmatic, but also this piece of, either being misunderstood or, staying with your true north. So how does this ring true for you? Or does it?
So many things, and it's just so many things. Listening to your message, what you were saying makes complete sense to me. I had a little bit of, again, a different experience because my mom was very much like, Stacey, you can do anything you want to do in this world. She allowed me to feel in myself that I can just do things, but I had to work really, really hard. I think the balance between those two things growing up allowed me to always kind of stay in the clouds, but knowing that the hard work was the part that kept me grounded. So a lot of the times when entrepreneurs are, talking to me about how do they do this and how do you get to the next level, and I think to myself, when I know too much at times, for me, not for everybody, but when I know too much at times, it limits me and it makes me paralyzed in towards going forward. I almost get stuck because when I am trying to figure out what to do, and am I doing this right? Or is this the way I'm supposed to go there? Am I supposed to do this like that? Versus when I actually allow myself to feel and go to what I actually envision, plan that goal, plan what it is that I want to do, and then work backwards, it works better for me. So it's not, and a lot of times in business, they'll say, you got to start from the bottom and work yourself up. For me, I absolutely go the opposite way. I'm like, when I was a performing artist, they would say, play to the back of the house, let us pull you back. And it's sort of the same idea as that. I'm like, get the biggest vision that you absolutely don't even know how you're going to do it. You just know that you want it, and then work backwards and say, what would I have to do first? And then second, and then third, and then fourth to get there. And know that it's not a straight line. There are going to be things that come about that you failed, and those failures are actually the most beautiful gifts, though they hurt and you will cry and they're hard. But those failures are the ones that actually bring your resilience and allow you to continue to keep growing. But you need them. You need the failures and you need the points in order to get to that place where you will achieve that it's in the clouds.
Yeah.
Bobby, I'm hearing you resonate. This is resonating with you.
I love it. Yeah, like I just love it because it's true. I know there's a cliche saying of there's no such thing as failures, but I don't believe in that. I think there is such thing as failures, but I do believe that it's the failures and all the hardships that get you into that next thing. Lamppost to lamppost, and exactly that. And I love that. And that's kind of the way I've everything. Is everything I move forward. On especially with business decisions is exactly that. If it fails, that's okay. At least I tried it, right?
That's exactly it. And I think so many times, like I got into a business advisor and he would tell me how to do certain things that I didn't know anything about. I just did this again, like I said, I just started business kind of as a gap and something that I wanted to do. When I started to really understand what I had to do, I would really not want to fail. I didn't want to fail, which means that I wouldn't do the things that were necessary to just do. You can't be afraid of failing. You just got to go and do it, and know that when you're doing it, you absolutely will fail, but those failures will teach you the most beautiful things. And so I think it's just great. And I think anyone who has a vision and a dream, you have to go for it. You just have to go for it.
Oh, I love that.
And
So I want to pivot a little bit because I think that we were talking about, failures, the things that you weren't able to achieve what you envisioned in a moment. But that's also, there's a different circumstance where you can be misunderstood. And I know for an impact business, this is not uncommon, very sadly, because you got advice. You gave a great example, Stacey, of an advisor. He's like, well, this is how you do it because this is how you traditionally do it in a profit-based model. And so have either of you had examples of where you felt misunderstood because you're a values-driven leader? And is there any examples that you could share with us?
100% in my land, I feel my whole business came because of values and purpose, even beyond just sustainability itself. I'm always looking at how can I change the lives of others? How can I make your life better? How can I make you feel better in your clothing? How can I make you want to go further in your life? And so sometimes I'd be talking to business advisors or those sort of people who are only looking at the commodity and the money. They'd be like, Stacey, that's something that you do after you've made money. And I would say, I can't make the money unless I feel that way. So there's a bit of a disconnect, because for me, it wasn't just about, we got to make such and such dollars and cents just right off the top. For me, it was like, how many people can I motivate? How many people can I inspire? How many people can I make feel amazing? And so there was a real big disconnect. And so, but I do know you have to blend the two together, because your business has to work. So there is a level that you do have to look at the dollars and cents and how that can make money. You're often misunderstood by, the people who are just in the business sector, because they're going to look at you and say you're kind of hoo-ha, rah-rah kind of personality is not selling products or making money. You have to be able to bring the two together. But when you do bring the two together, it feels amazing. But you definitely have to, you're misunderstood, but at the end of the day, the dollars and cents is what keeps the business running.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing, Robbie, I want to hear your thoughts on this as well. But what I'm hearing is there's sort of that expression, be profitable so you can do more. But there's a twist on that, because there's the be profitable and then you can do more, which is different from be profitable and do more. And I think that's a nuance that sometimes gets lost along the way. So I thank you for sharing that, Stacey.
And I think that I couldn't just be profitable and then do more as the aftermath and say, oh, I'm now this, big business owner. Now I can do things to help others. I actually have to do it in conjunction for me, because I'm not driven by just money making. I'm driven by impact. I'm driven by sustainability. I'm driven by the emotion. So if anyone is like me in that landscape, you have to see how to balance those two together.
Yeah, definitely. And Bobby, what about yourself?
I think being misunderstood has actually been the reason I am where I am today, and I embrace that and I love it, because when I was raising and when I started this company, so many people looked at me and just said, you're not going to be able to do this. It's, this isn't going to happen. It's, you're not going to compete with Upwork. You're not going to compete. And I really had to remind people that that's not what I was trying to do. I was trying to give work to those that have been told no, to keep people in remote communities in their communities, to people with disabilities, people who are queer and are constantly can't even go to work because of who they are. I'm trying to be that. And I knew that there is a way I could still keep profit margins at bay. I could still grow and still make money from it. But people just couldn't, they couldn't get over the fact that I had no experience in being a CEO. But then again, when you think about it, what founder does? We all just jump into it, we figure it out, right? And so I had to really prove myself wrong, and we're right, I should say. But when I started really building out the values at Virtual Gurus, a lot of the values that are here now are written because of my experience raising money. So some of our values, when you come into our office, it says, act like an owner. So everybody here is to act like an owner, be an owner, you're an owner, we're a collaborative environment. And A lot of this came from that people didn't think that I could do it, but also thinking that they were trying to tell me how to run my business. And it's like, no, 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 I can figure this out. And then the other one would be that, you treat everybody with respect and that we're a collaborative environment, and that there is no such thing as hierarchy around here. And a lot of that also came from, the investors and everything thinking that they were, my hierarchy and they could tell me what to do. So I think a lot of it was really just being misunderstood is actually what drove me to be in this position. And I value that and I actually embrace it.
I'm going to go a little bit and dig into something you just said. Can you tell us a little more about the process? Because you obviously had values that you came into this business, but then going through, it sounds like you revisited and maybe added to or refined how the values were structured. Was there a formal process that you went through, or is this something that you worked on over time?
Yeah, so we actually just spent the last 5 months redoing our entire values at Virtual Brews.
Wow.
We've scaled over the pandemic 500% year over growth, and then just recently we're about 300% year over growth scale. We're getting pretty big. We're actually about to launch in Europe. We're all over the U.S. I've just spoke at the Super Bowl, and that's brought in us, I don't even know how much in sales. It's been pretty crazy. And so one of the things I realized we needed to do was recheck in with our values, our mission and vision and values, because they're, as you scale, a lot of that can get lost along the line, especially when you have so many employees. There's over 1,100 people, so it can get lost along the line. And I really had to re-approach that. So I had a value, vision, and mission workshops. And so now we have values gurus. So there's 25 employees that have been chosen as value gurus, and they have a big star on their desk. And you can go to them if you feel that you need to check in for safety or this or that. And so we were able to take all these workshops and rebuild it. And now it's right when you come into the door off of one of the elevators. We're 2 full floors now. And then you can come in and it's all there. It's where everybody can see it, and everybody gets to live those values every single day.
Oh, okay, my heart is so full listening to this. I love hearing this. And that cascade thing, the cascade component of it, I think is the part that is so important. Thank you for sharing about that process. Stacey, if I can ask you, one of the things around, having practical goals incorporated into your business, do you have some examples that you can share for us, but also how you measure that success? Because you talked about creating impact, and sometimes measuring impact is a piece that people can not relate to because they just don't picture how it works.
Practical goals, I think, is something that, yeah, definitely it's necessary that you need to have. And I think you need to have a lot of small ones, not just the big ones. I think it's important to not just have the big, lofty goals, but to have goals that could just be things that you do every day. I always say oftentimes the things that have got me further forward is doing the things that I don't want to do. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we tend to love our craft. We love the artistic parts of our craft. We love the things that feel good, but oftentimes it's the things that we don't like that are the things that really put us forward. So I think in those things, for a lot of people, it might be cold calling or reaching out to people or actually actively selling your product or getting someone to sell it for you. And I think if you can just, even with practicality, make a list of, I need to do 5 of these today, every day. And if you can just check it off and see how many you've done, it just makes it really simple to understand how long it takes and if you're able to start it or stop it, just in a very, very small respect. And to really understand that you have to start with one goal to get to the next goal. I think oftentimes we get mad that we're not in that big thing because we're like upset, we get anxiety, we get depressed over the fact that we didn't hit that thing. But did you do the first thing to order to get to that second thing? If we don't complete that first thing of calling 5 people, we can't actually be, whatever your big top goal is. So I think having those really practical small goals, then you can understand, like I said, I was going to call 5 people today, but I only called 1. You can't get upset with yourself if you really wanted 25 at the end of the week.
Oh, no, that's so true. And I think you've raised a really interesting point that there's a practical side to goals, right? There's the big goal that might be the objective, but then there's all of the breakdown steps that you have to do in order to get there. And
we don't want to do those little steps.
well, and I think It works both ways because there's another part to it where we can sometimes focus too much on the tasks
Sure.
themselves, and we stop thinking about the big goal because we get caught up in sort of the day to day. So that blend again, that balance that we were talking about earlier between having your head in the clouds and getting the work done. I love that. And within your company, because you talked about some, the impact measures. So you talked about sustainability and you talked about the different ways that you're contributing to zero waste in fashion. Are there tangible ways that you're able to measure those impact goals that you set for yourself, either at a sort of the day to day, we measure this thing, or cumulatively, we know that this is the impact that we created?
We don't have an actual measurement. Probably we should. We don't have an actual measurement of what we actually do on a day to day. But I know that when I go to do anything, I look at how can I do this to be the best case scenario. So for example, when I do all my patterns, so I make the patterns by myself at first. When we get the patterns digitized, we go to a digitization process where there's very, very minimal waste in the patterns. So the way that the patterns are laid out, we do that so that there's really like only centimeters or inches between each panel piece when it's cut, whether they cut two different styles at the same time, two different sizes or whatnot, to really get as much as they can, almost like a puzzle. So what I'm saying is that when we're going into doing certain things, we'll look at how best can we do this to make it sustainable, the best case scenario. So for cutting, we do that. When we're going to dye some fabric, we do a lot of the custom milling and dyeing here in Canada. We will look at how can we use the lowest impact dyes? How can we, use people who are, working in ethical places, not doing it overseas. So we just really, I don't have a measurement on a day to day, but I just know that in everything we do, we even are part of Canopy right now. And Canopy is about really not cutting down ancient forests in order to make in order to make paper bags and things like this. So instead of using paper bags, we have cotton bags for all of our pieces that are reusable that people can use. So we just really think about every aspect. How can we do our very best, knowing that we're not going to be perfect, but how can we make it better through every process we do?
Oh, I really like this. So it's at the top level, it's that decision making. These are the values we have, these are the outcomes that we want. And so it's actually literally, I'll use the term baked in to the process as you go along through that. It's fabulous.
Thank you.
I am going to ask my last question to the two of you before we shift gears. But what have been some of the biggest challenges that either of you have faced being a purpose-driven brand and leader? We heard a little bit about that before from Christy, this idea that, we are post-pandemic and there's rising costs and there's labor shortages and there's interest and there's all kinds of things just shifting in the marketplace. So how have you, are there challenges that you have, and is there a piece of advice that you might share to others?
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's the economy and the way things are changing is such, it's just so volatile right now that it is so hard to essentially predict what's going to happen. And one of the things with us at Virtual Gurus is you go through mass scale like we have, and then we kind of essentially flatline because we're building out the technology. And then you go through more scale. And we're figuring out here on this end that we have to do a full-on shift and pivot. And sometimes along the way, you might have to do some layoffs. You might have to let people go. You might have to change the complete culture of the company to get you to that next level. And one thing I'm learning right now is that it's okay to have to do that to keep up with the changing times. Like we're scaling into a point where it's we're going to be the largest North American, not just largest Canadian. But one of the things that comes with that is all of the things that you have to change culture wise, to financially, to pay, to, COLA, cost of living adjustments, to everything. And it just can all roll and snowball all at once. And I'm realizing that it's okay to have to go through that and have to talk to your employees to say, it might get uncomfortable for a bit, but it's okay to do that too. And I think that's something that as founders we don't talk too often about, because there's so many companies out there that are doing layoffs. There's so many companies that are shutting down their offices or now going back into the offices, and all of this is because of the economy. And I think it's important that we embrace that and talk to our employees and be completely transparent with them.
I really appreciate you've mentioned it twice now, how open and broad the communication is within the company.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We have a collaborative environment. So we actually have a thing called Fuck Up Fridays. And so on Fridays, we have a new event space in here, and you can come and you get on stage, and essentially you can do a monologue about how you messed up that week. And we all laugh and scream and we hoot and holler and we celebrate like no other. And I think embracing that failure is important. And so we do it every Friday now. We also do things where we talk about the shift of the company and where we're going. And then we have collaborative days throughout the week too. So you can collaborate with somebody. If you're tasked with something, you don't know how to do it, then go into the collaborative room and talk with somebody, and everybody will just go in there and help you through it, and everybody will support each other through it. And so I think it's taken us a long time to create that type of environment.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing.
Mhm.
Stacey, any final thoughts from you? And then we're going to come back at the very end because we're going to ask you one last question
For
at the very end.
sure. I think mine is a little bit different. I feel like my biggest challenge has been within myself. My biggest challenge has been about raising my own paradigm and raising what I feel I'm possible of or capable of achieving. I have to continue to kind of dive into myself and understand that I'm able to be more and do more than I'm currently doing. And every time I raise the bar, I have to kind of readjust to understand that I'm able to do that. I know now that a lot of it has to do with, I was looking at it based on the limitations that Black women have. I know the limitation that we only less than 1% get funded. I know that 14% of fashion designers, there's only 14% that are women. I know all of the adversities, and I kind of worked within that landscape being like, how can I scale if it's absolutely almost impossible for me to get funding? How can I scale if there's no women on top? I have to continue to shift my paradigm inside. So yes, it comes out in the business on overall, but the inner game for me is a really, really big, I'm not going to say it's a challenge, but it's a definite hurdle that I do on a daily. I work on it on a daily. I work at continuing to raise and shift what I'm capable of, because I'm already higher than I would have ever imagined in my life. I don't really see many people who look like me doing what I'm attending to do, what I achieve, what I hope to do in the future, what I'm striving to do. So I have to continue to keep pushing and allowing myself to know that I'm worthy enough, I'm capable enough, and I can get to those higher levels.
Oh, I've got goosebumps. Thank you, Stacey. I love that. And I love how that mind shift really works. I want to thank both of you so much for your insights. Please stay on the line because we've got a couple more questions for you at the end. And for Amanda and Holly, thank you for your patience. It's been awesome and watching your visual expressions I can tell you were relating to this conversation. And so I know that both of you have a professional service background, really supporting on the service side. So Holly working with the Futurepreneur around the Indigenous startups, and Amanda, for yourself, you've recently started the Baked Impact Agency. And just I wanted to talk a little bit more because both of you have also been entrepreneurs. Holly, I think you've got the Thunderbird Consulting, if I remember correctly, as well. And so my first question to you, and one of the things I want to sort of dig in is really how your entrepreneurial background intersects with the work that you do supporting other businesses with their growth and impact strategy, and has having that entrepreneurial mindset how's that been a benefit to you? So Holly, why don't I start with you, and then Amanda will hop over to hear your story as well.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is such an amazing opportunity, and to be in a virtual room with so many wonderful, impactful individuals and females and women. This is amazing. So, yeah, I think what I'll say is really I've journeyed through entrepreneurship as an urban First Nations woman, and I was also really experienced in understanding the firsthand view of an Indigenous entrepreneur living on reserve. And I initially began my entrepreneurial journey out of pure need to provide for my family. This prior to Thunderbird Consulting years and years and years ago. I never, ever considered myself as an entrepreneur. And I think that this is definitely a reality for so many Indigenous business owners, or those who are self-employed who are Indigenous. There's not this direct correlation to the word entrepreneur. The business owners in our community don't really essentially label themselves as such. And it wasn't until I was working with entrepreneurs and in Indigenous entrepreneurship sector, that I realized, hey, I am an entrepreneur. Wow, okay. And then I was, I'll never forget, I was facilitating a workshop for a group of youth, and there was probably about 30 youth. It was in Musqueam, Alberta. And I asked the question when I first started, how many of you know an entrepreneur? Raise your hand. And not one of them did. And then I stood there for a minute and I went, no, I have to reframe it. So I reframed the question. How many of you know somebody who does XYZ, somebody who cooks or who beads or who babysits or who does, all of these self-employed kind of endeavors? And all but maybe 6 put their hands up. And I was like, okay, well, it's very obvious that this word doesn't transcend into our community. And so when I realized I was an entrepreneur, and then finding that, way within the community, and starting Thunderbird Consulting, I did that out of the need for these countless requests and this undeniable need for the service that I was able to provide at that time. So what really resonates with the work that I do at Futurepreneur, and previously I've worked with Indigenous entrepreneurs specifically for almost 9 years now. And the barriers and the struggles that Indigenous entrepreneurs face are exponential in comparison to non-Indigenous entrepreneurs. So especially if that Indigenous entrepreneur is operating on reserve. Of course, like funding, financing, marketing, supply of resources, mentorship, these all play a really huge factor in the success of any business. But when there's a lot of large barriers to overcome, specifically for Indigenous businesses, it can be absolutely overwhelming and daunting. So all of this tied in with the fact that so many Indigenous entrepreneurs start out while also having full-time responsibilities, as parents, as full-time or ongoing caregivers, going to school, whatever the case may be. It's difficult to carve out that time to really start a business from the ground up without the support. And so very, very lucky to lead a team that supports entrepreneurs specifically. And I'm proud to say I was there, and I still am there within that experience of entrepreneurship. So I can see, the gaps. I don't have to put myself in the shoes because I am in those shoes. And I feel the frustration, I feel those downs and those negative pitfalls, but then also feeling the celebration of the great things that happen. And so that, combined with the experience of the team that we have at Futurepreneur with the IESP program, I think almost everybody has entrepreneurial experience on the team right now. So we're really able to build the programs for people exactly like us. So it makes a world of a difference.
Oh, Holly, amazing. I want to really thank you for highlighting the importance, because, as you're asking that question, do you know these people? Of course, I know those people, but I don't know those other people who have labeled themselves as entrepreneurs, and how important words are and language and how we see ourselves, because that's going to affect what we look for when we're looking for resources. We're not going to look for entrepreneurial support if we don't see ourselves as entrepreneurs. So thank you for highlighting that. It's very important. Amanda.
It's really funny that Holly started out that way, talking about the word entrepreneur, because I have notes written from when I read the questions earlier, and I have similar things about the word entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, or if you're an entrepreneur, it sounds like you have a business degree and access to capital, which, it's not true, totally not true, but that's the value of the word. And I don't see myself as an entrepreneur, even though maybe that's what it is now. As I was thinking about this, and also because I'm at the start of a new venture, I was really looking back at my life and what was my first experience with entrepreneurship. And it was through my parents. Neither one have a college degree. My dad doesn't even have a high school diploma, but they were owning these businesses. My mom, a bakery, and my dad was a landscaper, and they were growing these businesses in a way that was just very like, this is the best opportunity to support our family. So it's just interesting as we're all reflecting on that word and what that really means. But going back to the proximity of my parents and watching them grow their businesses, I've always been in close proximity with business owners, entrepreneurs. I've painted walls for friends that were opening businesses, and I've gone through finances for people. I've just always been close to people that I would consider entrepreneurs and business owners, but never felt like one myself. So for me, that's really where my service-based business has come from, is supporting business owners and entrepreneurs.
And I always feel like entrepreneurship is something that's a little bit mystical in a way. And I am very much the behind the scenes person, the operational person, the how does this all fit together? What are we actually doing today that's going to make sense for where we want to be a year from now? Yeah, I feel like I just gave you like 7 different answers all in one.
Okay.
But I'm feeling I'm feeling in my heart about this one because that is a very loaded word and is connecting to a lot of things for me right now.
Amazing. Amanda, thank you for sharing. Holly, as we think about the concept of sustainable development, and my understanding is that Indigenous and non-Indigenous owned business owners view it differently, either through way of life and practices. And for Indigenous, it's really deeply rooted in sustainability in how you live. And so, how has this impact or shape the work that you're doing, working with Indigenous owned startups and entrepreneurs?
That's a great question. And I think that when we look at, I mean, the Indigenous experience is so varied and so diverse. And there isn't necessarily this commonality amongst all Indigenous peoples. But I can confidently say that, in all honesty, 75 to 80% of the Indigenous entrepreneurs that I've encountered in the last 10 plus years have had a sustainability or social impact focus in their business model. And it's never an afterthought, an addition on to the creation of the business. It's always kind of intrinsically built from that center point. And some are small implementations and some are quite large, but they are almost always there. And what our team is looking at now is really how to provide meaningful programming and curriculum and tools that will support the creation of a sustainable business model from the very beginning at Futurepreneur, and really highlighting what makes this business model maybe different than the traditional revenue generating for-profit company. So as social impact is such a strong driver in the need to create businesses from the lens of many Indigenous entrepreneurs, because I think it's just it's tied to the values and the teachings that we've grown up with in our communities. And so with that, Indigenous business owners tend to build businesses that make a difference in the community, give back, provide employment opportunities, provide opportunities to Indigenous youth through various like sports and activities, a large focus on preservation of culture and language, food security, sustainability, food sustainability, access to clean water, transportation, social info, like the list goes on and on and on. And all of this added with the fact that they want to build businesses that will become cornerstones and beacons within their communities as well, and provide for their families for generations to come, hopefully. So by providing that security and also contributing greatly to Indigenous economic prosperity as a whole. So these are continuously considered and incorporated in the work that we do every day with Indigenous entrepreneurs. We know that Indigenous entrepreneurs start with their why, but that their why reaches far out from themselves and considers all of their relations as well in a more egalitarian approach. So Indigenous peoples always have been entrepreneurs. We're the first entrepreneurs of Canada, and we make up the majority of impact-based businesses today if we really looked at the studies. And so at Futurepreneur, we really try to understand this and come from that approach, and we live it as well every day. So we ensure that our offerings reflect these really important values. And so, like, to answer the question itself, I think that, you know, that social responsibility and social impact and driven approaches are they aren't added on after the fact. And I've heard many of you speak today and really coming from that focus, and just really, really proud that so many Indigenous business owners start with that focus always.
And as I'm listening to that list that you were sharing, I mean, I'm hearing the sustainability goals in there. And so do you see, or how do you see the role of Indigenous entrepreneurship advancing the broader sustainability goals? We know them as the SDG. This is
Yeah, and so I'll just quickly say that I'm really honored to be a part of a group called the Indigenous Entrepreneurship working group that is an international group, brings together Indigenous entrepreneur programming organizations from Canada, Colombia, Peru, and Australia. And what I've found sitting in this group is that there's so many similarities on how Indigenous entrepreneurs operate in all of these countries, and that social impact and sustainability are, again, always one of really the first major considerations when building a business. Indigenous communities and Indigenous peoples, locally, nationally, globally, have been known as the caretakers of the land and resources. So it's absolutely no secret that we're facing a crisis, and many crises, and that change has to happen. And by really researching, I think, and connecting with the values and missions of Indigenous-based businesses, that's really uncovering the why, but also the how these businesses are impactful and leading change. So I think it will cause a ripple effect for sure in the business world, creating those synergies and possibilities for partnership endeavors. Indigenous businesses need to be at all of these great things, like any major events like today, and policy discussions. Being consulted and incorporated at all levels is really important. And so I think that there have been many reports and studies on Indigenous businesses globally as well. And it is the responsibility of, I think, anybody to do their due diligence, whether they be service providers or small business owners, consumers themselves, community members. It's our due diligence to do that research and to find what is needed and how we can take part.
Well, thank you so much, Holly. I love that. The why first, and then the how, and then the ripple effect. Amanda, in your experience, have you encountered situations where these sustainable goals, or sustainability goals rather, have clashed with either short-term financial interests or for under-resourced business owners? And how have you seen some of these conflicts reconciled?
For sure. And before we move on to that, I just want to say something that adds a little bit to what Holly was saying. It's something that I think about weekly, if not daily, in my business, something that Jace Meyer actually said on a panel years ago, that socially conscious business isn't innovative, it's Indigenous. And I think about that a lot with my work, especially being based in Canada. So I just want to say that because it's a good thing to come back to in your mind if you're a non-Indigenous founder. Okay, but getting back to your actual question. So yeah, I definitely see this a lot, especially like revenue and stable finances are essential for a healthy business. So I think that when you're kind of up against the wall and you're looking at, do I invest in impact or do I do what's right financially and maybe short term for the business? It's a really hard decision. I think that founders are all the time in very high pressure situations. And this can be a tricky spot to be in. What I always tell founders is what's going to make sense for the whole of the business a year from now. You might take a financial hit today. It might last a little bit, but what's going to make sense a year from now? I also truly believe that for every revenue and profit solution, there is something that can add to impact. And for every impact solution, there's something that can add to profit and revenue. I don't think that those things work separately. I really think that they can work together. A really good example is there was this Patagonia story where they had this jacket and they were trying to make it so that it was a very technical jacket. It was going to be at a high price point. It was going to be like this very innovative thing that they were doing, but they couldn't find materials that had the performance that they needed that were going to be able to be fully sustainably sourced. So what they did is they went out to their customers and they were like, listen, this is a situation, like this is what we're struggling with. We can make it sustainable, like on our regular level of like how well sourced this is, but it will perform poorer, or we can make it perform incredibly well, but it will be less sustainable. What do you guys want? Like, let's bring you guys into the conversation. People actually ended up choosing the less sustainable option. Patagonia sold a ton of those jackets, and they had a plan for how they were going to move forward in research to try to make this more sustainable within the next 5 years. To me, that's pretty amazing because they were able to keep the revenue and sales growth there, but where they won is in the governance piece. You know, sustainability took a hit, but they brought in their stakeholders and they said, what do you guys want? We're being transparent about what's going on. We're still trying to run a business. Where are your values at? So we know what to make for you. And when I hear of examples like that, I really think that you can apply that to every situation you have. You just have to think about it as, how is this profit solution investing in impact, and how is this impact solution investing in profit?
Oh, what I really like about that is it's almost like there's this debate, right, between purpose and impact. And we talked about it a little bit. I think Stacy and Robbie brought this up, the idea of it's be profitable so you can do more, be profitable and then do more, be profitable and do more. And sort of this conflict between the two, that sometimes you need to put a balance between those. But there's also another piece that you brought into that, which is, I think, Amanda, the idea that you have, the ESG, you mentioned governance, right? So there's the economic piece, there's a sustainability piece, which has multiple components, environmental, social, as well as the idea of governance around that. And so what are some ways that, in smaller businesses that may be under-resourced, but they are able to pursue impact goals or address major global issues that we've been sort of talking about? And do you have any examples of those? The questions to either of you. It's a loaded question. Do we ask it again?
Yeah, ask it again.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some of the ways that small businesses can pursue impact goals, right? So we've been talking about sustainable development and this ability to address these major global events and gaps. What are some examples that you might know of how smaller businesses can contribute and pursue those goals?
Holly, do you want to go first?
I think ultimately it's really starting with your purpose and your why. And I know like you had highlighted this, Brooke, like there's the do more, or be profitable and contribute more, or be profitable and contribute. So I've always, when working with Indigenous businesses to build that business model of sustainability and social impact, that starting with the purpose is so key. And I always try to really lean on, like, number one, always do what you say you're going to do, and don't over promise and under deliver. So if it does look like, from my experience anyway, like that moving needle of, okay, we're going to start, we want to have this social impact driven model within the business itself. Let's build that in now at the beginning, because that's, you're really focused on your value and your why. And there's always room to add more once the business becomes more successful, or in ways in which you can expand upon that. And I think, like, the tangible, actual ways that can be done are so varied. There's so many different ways that you can include that. But again, you have to be a business, right? You have to remember yourself as well as a business owner, and making sure that you pay yourself and pay the bills, and you need to pay your staff, your operating costs, et cetera, et cetera. You need to continue to do all of these things and also operate with a purpose. And so finding that balance is really, it can be really difficult. But finding those ways to incorporate the purpose in addition to maybe that monetary piece, if you are driven by that as well, I think that's really a focus on that impact, and being maybe really creative and innovative in the ways in which you're looking at that social development and social sustainability, who you're hiring, or the list can go on and on of how you're doing this. But I think when it's a tiered approach, when it's not just one focused way in which you're providing or creating impact, if it's a multitude, then the better.
Sorry, Holly, can I dig in a little bit to something you said? Because I think that last piece is so valuable, because there is, like, literally so many different ways. Tracy gave us the example of how she thinks about the layout of the cut of all of her pieces, and mixes and matches patterns on a single sheet of fabric so that she's getting the most out of that fabric, literally. And so are there any examples that you can think of? Because I think many of us are familiar with the traditional model where we're literally measured by profit, right? Sometimes we use the term EBITDA, so earnings before taxes, interest, appreciation, blah, blah. And so is there what are some of the other ways that you've heard of or seen or celebrated that we can measure the why, the impact of our why and that benefit that we're trying to bring?
Yeah, I think there's so many different examples of this. So, again, like who you're hiring as well. Like, so I think right away to like She Native, for example, Red Rebel Armor, for example, who hire the ways in which they're hiring their team members are really focused on providing an opportunity and a need for, and Bobby as well does this, right? Offering an opportunity and a need for those that maybe wouldn't have the same opportunity and need. So I know Devin Fiddler with She Native originally started her business focusing on hiring single Indigenous mothers in the Saskatoon area where they could bring their children to work. So there was a gap she was filling. So something like that, that's really like that social driven model. You can go to Kendall Netmaker, for example, as well, who started Nichi Gear, and a certain percentage of the profits go toward funding activities, sports activities for Indigenous youth on reserve and off reserve that maybe wouldn't have the opportunity otherwise. The ways in which packaging, I've seen, the packaging and even I think, well, this is a bad example, but like Amazon, for example, will give you, the opportunity to if you order a lot of products, like you can put it over like 2-day delivery instead of all on one day, or all on one day instead of 2 days, opposite there. But I think ultimately, like what I've seen the most within Indigenous businesses is one that really stands out to me right now, besides those that I just listed, is there's an Indigenous business that provides a rideshare business for on reserve that where transportation is a huge issue. MMIW is a huge issue within this region, and providing that rideshare service at for cost, but also donating rides to those in need, those women in need who are mothers and caretakers and pillars of their communities and families that need to go into the nearest town center to go grocery shopping, who would otherwise have hitchhiked. So these are just, some of those really innovative ways, I think, that that businesses are thinking outside of the box, and they're not just focused on that profit-driven stereotype of a business.
Ollie, these are such good examples. Thank you. I know I put you on the spot, so thank you so much for that. And I just want to clarify for myself as well, the MMIA, that is the missing or murdered and missing Indigenous women.
Yeah, MMIW, 2SG. Yeah.
Thank you. Amanda, what about you? What are practical ways that business owners can meaningfully create and measure impact, the impact that they're creating?
Yeah, I think that this can feel like a lot, especially when you're a small business and maybe you're a one-person show or you've got a small team and you're thinking, oh my God, I've got to change the world too. Like how am I going to do this? I always like to tell people that it's more important to focus your impact on something. Sheena gave me permission to share this, but when I joined the Tease team, Sheena was contributing charitable donations to like all of these different organizations, which was so great because I could tell that the intention was there, but there wasn't really any way to know exactly where that money was going. How are we vetting these charitable partners? What impact are our dollars actually having? So that's kind of how Founders Fund got to the point where it is now too. Like, how do we focus this so that the little amount of resources we do have are going into less things and things that are definitely integrated into the business. Like you see them in every part of what we do. It's in employee handbooks, operational handbooks, how we vet suppliers, everything. But how can we ensure that it's really focused? And when I say focused, I also mean it has to be supporting your primary product or service. I will sometimes see really well-intentioned founders, let's say they own a bakery, and they're like, yeah, for every $1 of this croissant, it goes to the dog rescue down the street. And that's so beautiful. That's such a beautiful sentiment. It has nothing to do with their product or service, unless it's like a dog themed cafe. And then, there's something there, but it doesn't bring back, it doesn't engage customers. It's not going to really drive any impact metrics. Like people aren't there to support dogs, right? So I think that you need to have it focused on your product or service. And then as far as measuring tools go, Google Forms. Oh my God, Google Forms are so great at measuring so many metrics within a business. They are free. They literally, you can export the graphs and like there they are, even when we're talking internal like demographics and things like that, or like any kind of reporting, you can do it through there. And when I say reporting, I mean employees reporting, like if they're feeling safe at work, if they're feeling like they have all the tools that they need to be successful. I think that we also forget about internal operations for social impact, because the things that I just mentioned, like your employees having a place to provide feedback on their experience as a stakeholder in the business as well, is so important. But oftentimes we're looking at the external impact that we have, and it's not always reflected internally. But definitely Google Forms are a great way to measure some impact. I also say choose 3 really simple metrics that you can commit to over 3 years. Have them publicly visible if you can. I know people are a little squeamish about that, but I really truly think that that's where you get the most emotional engagement from people that are purchasing your product or service. And measure them over 3 years, because 3 years is enough time for you to spend the first year maybe floundering around a bit, figuring it out. Second year, you're polishing it. Third year, you're like really in a growth stage for those metrics, and you're able to share that success broadly with whatever your audience involves.
Amazing. Oh, I amazing. I just got a note from Sheena. Thank you, Sheena. So this has been so good. I really appreciate the tangibility that, Holly, you gave us examples to celebrate and practical examples that we can visualize and really dig into. And Amanda, your idea of the 3 over 3 years, 3 and public, this is really great. And when we talk about reporting, this also sort of leads back a bit into governance as well. I want to leave it. Are there any final words that the two of you have? So Holly, if I can invite you, are there any final words you'd like to share with our community?
I think my final words is just really focus on the purpose. You can always add more to that purpose, and remember that you do need to run a business as well. You need to rely on your support system, your community. Reach out. Let the tentacles reach out far and wide, and include Indigenous stakeholders, whatever they may be, as well within that circle, because. Yeah, our voices are strong, and we've got a lot to offer too. So yeah, just keep going but really focus on your purpose and your values.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much. And Amanda.
I think just that impact can support profit, and profit can definitely support impact, and looking at those things as an ecosystem versus completely separate things is really going to be, I think, the key to long-term stable success within a business.
Oh, I really like that one too. If I can add one of my own, Sheena, before I turn it back over to you, and that is use the words that you're comfortable with, and be bold and ask people, are there other ways to describe this or other words that I don't know? It's been really helpful for me. I know as I became more familiar with business jargon, more things became available to me because I knew what to look for. Sheena, I believe you have some final words from Bobby for us. We were going to ask her for her piece of advice that she would have given herself back when she first started the business.
Definitely. And actually, I'll invite Stacy first. Stacy, if you are still there, I know we're a little bit in overtime, but
Oh, perfect. You are, Stacy. I didn't see
Okay.
your lineup. Wonderful. Welcome back. So, Stacy, why don't we jump to you first? What is the piece of advice that you would have given yourself when you were younger, when you first started the business?
Oh my gosh. I think you have to keep going. It is not something that you're just going to make a business and it's just going to be that same business right from the top. I think that business is a journey, and it's a beautiful journey, and it's about getting to every single aspect of it to know that your business will transform as you go on. I think especially people who are purpose driven, they're going to feel that their business gets closer to what their absolute purpose is. You might not know what that is right from the beginning, but it is a journey that will continue to grow and grow with you, and to not be afraid of failure, and to not be afraid to keep growing.
I love that. Stacey, thank you so much for being a part of our event today. And I have Bobby's final words and what advice that she would share, because she had to run off to a meeting as we're heading into overtime here. But her last words are, accept that we won't always make the right decisions, that we will screw up royally sometimes, and understanding that failure is not the opposite of success. It's actually part of the success. I love that. Amazing. Thank you so much, Brooke. Again, you crush it as like our panel moderator. Thank you so much to our panelists as well, Amanda, Stacey, Holly, and Bobby. I think you added so much practical value, lessons learned, and experience that, you know, resonated deeply with our community today. So thank you. So moving on to our final part of our event today, and please stick around to the end if you are able to, because like I said in the chat box or hinted at it, we have a special gift actually courtesy of Bobby Reset and the team at Virtual Gurus. And so you'll want to stick around for that. And then also we have like some other gifts as well, but I won't share too much yet, but they are aligned with our next guest, Lucy Cullen. And I'm really excited to bring Lucy to the virtual stage right now, because Lucy's an OG Founders Fund community member. She joined our community as an early stage entrepreneur many years ago, and she's a serial entrepreneur and has grown into becoming a funding recipient once at Founders Fund as well, and then also became a mentor at Founders Fund. And now she leads, you know, workshops and helps facilitate events. So she's really a full ecosystem partner, one of the best. So Lucy, welcome. In terms of her official bio, Lucy helps entrepreneurs grow their company while decreasing stress and burnout. She has been an entrepreneur since 2015, personally launching 4 companies, including 2 first of their kind businesses in Canada. To date, Lucy has coached over 300 entrepreneurs all over the world to grow their businesses, including in the US, Colombia, Hong Kong, the UK, and Western Balkans. She has also worked as an expert consultant on impact entrepreneurship for the Canadian federal government and United Nations. And I think, you know, before Lucy continues from here, I think it's really important that when we talk about sustainability, we often think of social and environmental impact and what that looks like for our companies and our communities and so on. But I think we often forget that important missing piece of our own, you know, our own personal sustainability, right? Our having sustainable growth and well-being, and mitigating the risk of burnout, because when we're not, you know, performing in the best balance that we can of mental, physical, health, and otherwise, you know, that can lead to the detriment of ourselves and our company and the people that we're trying to serve in the process. And so that's why this next workshop is very close to my heart, and I'm sure is, you know, a relatable type of journey for many founders. So Lucy, I'll have you take it from here, and welcome back.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sheena. Hi, everyone. I managed to catch some of the event today, and it's been very inspiring, and it's fantastic to be back in this community. So thank you so much for having me. And I know this is the tail end of the event, so I'm going to make sure it is worth all your while to be sticking around. And yeah, let's get right into it. I'm also going to put in the chat my LinkedIn. If anyone would like to connect there, I would love to connect with you. So please add me on LinkedIn so we can meet. All right. Let's get into it. So we're talking about sustainable well-being, reducing stress, avoiding burnout, ultimately thriving as you grow your company. Okay, so there we go. So I'm going to walk you all through a 4-step framework around like thriving as entrepreneurs. And before we begin, at the end, I am going to be giving away I have limited spots, but I am going to be putting a link in the chat so you can book a one-on-one session to get free support specific to you and your business, because it is not a one-size-fits-all thing when it comes to stress reduction, streamlining your operations, and the specific support that entrepreneurs really need. Okay, so a bit about me. Sheena just gave it a fantastic introduction, so I'm not going to repeat it all, but this is just a little bit about who I am. But what I will say is I've been an entrepreneur for, a long time, and have had the absolute pleasure and honor of supporting other entrepreneurs in the impact space and otherwise to successfully launch and scale their company. So yeah, and I'm going to be totally honest with everyone. I did not expect to be doing a workshop like this today. Like if you would have asked me maybe, I don't know, a year ago, never would have expected it, but you'll see why momentarily, and I'm really excited to be here. I really feel like this is where my career was meant to go. So this workshop is for you if you're sick of feeling burnt out, stuck in the stress cycle, you know, if you will, kind of like the hamster in the wheel, and you feel so you can't really get out of it when it comes to stress that comes up and overwhelm in your business, whether you're in day one and you've got an idea that you want to come and bring it into the world, or you've been an entrepreneur for a number of years now. Like, it's at any stage in the game. And also, if you want to feel more resilient when it comes to navigating the highs and lows, feeling more at ease, and feeling more grounded. So one thing I am going to request for the duration of this workshop is an open mind, willingness to make changes, and also take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Like I said, it's not a one size fits all thing. And so I'm going to be teaching exactly, it's a 4-step framework that I utilize with my clients. I'm going to be sharing the highlights of the framework with my clients. I dive deep into the nitty gritty for every stage, but there's a lot of things that you'll be able to leave with today and start putting into action. And I'll also be giving you some real life examples. So I'm laughing because the photo on the right is pretty funny to me, although sad. And the reason I'm here today is I used to be the hustle queen, the queen of hustle. I will, like, it's not often that I've seen, you know, people teaching mindfulness who used to be the opposite of what they're teaching. I'm sure I'm sure it exists, but I haven't seen a lot of that. But I used to be burnt out. Like, I was the entrepreneur that was running myself into the ground, giving myself health problems as a result, like heart issues in my mid-20s. And it's like, I was the person that if I put my mind to something, I'm getting it done. I'm getting it done 120%. I don't care what it takes. I would say no to time with friends and family. I would be up late at night packing, packing dog treats for my business, Earth Pub, which is a dog treat company. That was my third one. And then up again at 6 a.m. the next day, getting the orders out. And then I was doing all the things all the time, and my health suffered. And it really came to a head when, after dealing with burnout for a number of years, like, there was one point that I had to take a month off of work completely. And then I was right back to working the way I was before. I was like pedal to the metal. And I kept telling friends and family, like, oh, it'll calm down when this happens, or I'll be less stressed when this happens. And like, that never came until basically my body forced me to stop working the way that I was working. And so it was in August 2022 when I had just come back from traveling in Europe for a couple months, and I was launching a new sister brand. I was going to launch Earth Cat. I was launching a new product line, first of its kind. And this is the time when I was running Earth Pup, that pet brand. I was launching a first of its kind product line. It hadn't been done in the pet space before. And it was like, everything was done. Packaging was printed, like, products are ready to rock. Woo, like, it's go time. And I all of a sudden got really sick, and I didn't know why, but and if anyone wants to hear this story in detail, I have a podcast episode on it. It's the first one. The Holistic Founder is the name of the podcast. But basically I couldn't eat, and I couldn't get food in me, and I couldn't figure it out. I saw 3 different doctors, and I was like, I'm really having trouble eating. I'm trying. I can't get any food in me. And 3 different doctors said the same thing to me. They all said, oh, you might be pregnant. Take a pregnancy test. And I was like, I'm on my period right now. That is not what is happening. Something is very wrong. So I didn't get more than 200 or 300 calories in me a day for about 2 weeks. And I wound up in the ER at one point. Same thing. They said, take a pregnancy test, and a Gravol sent me home. And I was planning on admitting myself to the hospital for a feeding tube, because I did not know what else to do. I didn't have energy to walk across the street. I constantly felt like I was going to faint. And then my mom said to me, why don't you see my naturopath? And I was like, I will do anything. I lost a ton of weight because I wasn't getting food in me as hard as I tried. And basically what we had realized had happened was I was exposed to toxic mold while I was traveling, specifically the group that has black mold in it, but like the worst one. And my organs, specifically my liver, had started to shut down. Now, why this is relevant to entrepreneurship is because my partner was traveling with me and he was totally fine. And when my doctor unpacked what I was going through, like launching a new product line, launching a sister brand, all like full throttle, working all the time, all the hours, doing all the things, my doctor was like, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Your body was already under so much stress that this one thing, an acute exposure to toxic mold, your body started to shut down. My liver was like, that's enough. We can't take it, because actually, I won't get into the details of certain organs with chronic illness, but my body had started to shut down. And what happened next was a year and a half of healing. So because how sick I was, like it's a long trajectory to get better. And I had to close my company down. There was no one else to run it. My body was like, Lucy, this is enough. We can't do this anymore. And yeah, I learned the lesson the hard way. And now it's my mission to make sure that no one else goes through this, because and the reason that I was giggling at the photo on this slide on the right, it's both sad and funny. It's funny now because that was in Montreal. My sister took that photo and I was so sick and like I couldn't eat any food, and everyone's around me eating pasta and having a great time. And I was just so miserable that I couldn't eat the pasta, which is why I think it's kind of funny. But yeah, that's how I used to work. And now, after learning that lesson the hard way, the hardest possible way, I figured out a new way of working. And I have this business now that I'm speaking to you all through, which is, coaching and consulting, and ultimately the mission to change how we are working in our businesses, because our businesses, we were just talking about impact and sustainability, and that is the theme. Our businesses are not going to make a difference in the world if we have to close it down because we burn out or we get too sick. So now with this new way that I've learned the hard way to work, my business is growing, which I'm very grateful for. I don't feel stressed the same way I did. And I'm like sleeping well. I'm not skipping meals the way that I used to when I was like, I don't have time to eat. And I've actually got time to be human, ultimately. And you'll see on this slide, like I play music. So like I've got time to do this now. Oh, like great. There's no more am I saying, oh, I'll be happy when, or I'll be relaxed when, or I'll do this thing when XYZ happens in my business. I can do it now. So like I said, this is ultimately my mission, to help entrepreneurs to grow their companies while decreasing stress and burnout, because this is going to be this is how we change the world. Like, I don't mean me, I mean like you with your companies. When you feel good as you grow your companies and your companies make a huge impact, that's how we change the world. Yeah, Sheena, time to be human. Also, everyone, please, I encourage putting things in the chat, any questions, anything that resonates. I've got it open in front of me and I'll be checking it regularly. And Tara, I'm so happy that it resonates. Awesome. And one disclaimer I'm going to say right now before we get into all the meat, now that you know where I'm coming to this workshop from, I'm not a medical professional. I'm an entrepreneur who learned this lesson very much the hard way. Business closing down, health, all that stuff, with a number of years of experience under my belt, and I've created this way of working that I just want to share with you. So yeah, that's what we're gonna get into. All right. And yes, Jessica, the healthiest versions of ourselves. Yes. Okay. So we're going to go into some tangible steps, some things you can take away right now. And what I'm going to encourage, I'll make sure, whether it's in the follow-up email, Sheena and I will connect to make sure you all have access to this deck. So you can just listen and take one thing from today that you're going to start to put into practice. And we're going to look at some ways to structure your calendar, some things that you can start doing, as well as a new daily routine. But of course, we need to define what burnout actually is. So according to CAMH, burnout is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. Burnout can make you feel emotionally drained and unable to function in the context of work and other aspects of life. Burnout can reduce productivity, lower your motivation, cause you to feel helpless, hopeless, and resentful. So as we're diving into the rest of this session, everything we're talking about is rooted in reducing the source of stress and restructuring things with regards to how you're working in your business. And then after that, we are then looking at integrating new practices that will ultimately help you to avoid burnout and increase mental resiliency. And we're creating a new, more sustainable way of working. That's what we're doing here. So 3 in 5 say they experience physical symptoms such as headaches or lack of sleep because of stress. 67% of women report burnout and 59% of men report burnout. This is according to a survey by Asana that they surveyed 10,000 people. Also, if you've navigated burnout, put it in the chat. I'd love to hear anyone who's actually been through some of the things that we're talking about. And also 61% of Americans say their stress level is at an all-time high, with 55% saying they're unable to enjoy life due to stress. So ultimately, I know I was very much this person for a very long time. And there are a lot of mistakes that I see with entrepreneurs because I've made them all. And I still see it a lot with the clients that I work with. So number one is ignoring the symptoms being fatigue, exhaustion, physical pain, poor appetite, getting sick more than usual, lack of motivation, feeling defeated, feeling disconnected from yourself and the world. Number two, waiting for your circumstances to change and not taking action. I was giving some examples earlier. Like I was that person. I'm like, this will be better when I hit 6 figures in revenue. And I was just waiting for all these other things to happen in my reality as opposed to taking control myself. Number three, reacting the wrong way. So coping with stress comes in many forms, but this could include emotional eating, substance use, avoiding work, unhealthy sleep routines, self-isolation, self-harm, anger, lashing out. We often turn to methods that only temporarily treat the symptoms of burnout, such as anxiety, instead of focusing on the root causes. And I also want to note, if there's anything here that you're currently navigating, it's always helpful to seek professional help as well. And I believe I mentioned that again later in this presentation, but therapy, getting support from medical professionals who can best support you. So I just want to note that. And number four, taking a brief break without making any sustainable long-term changes. This is a big one. Vegging out and watching Netflix for a weekend is really great, but it's only going to do so much if you go back to working the way that you used to before and you don't actually change the overwhelming to-do list, the very packed calendar. And then number five, implementing self-care practices without operational changes to support reducing the causes of stress and lower stress-related work wherever possible. And now, please note, I'm not saying we're getting rid of it altogether. We are reducing it wherever possible. So what do we do instead? So this is the framework that I would love for everyone here to just be mindful of and take this with you, implement it into, test it out. Try it for a couple of weeks, implement some of these methods. But it's a 4-step framework that I just made it for myself because I had to. And I now use it with my clients. Because for me, I always found it really frustrating when I would seek help and I would be told, oh, and let me be very clear, doctors are doing their best. And I'm very grateful to live in Canada with, access to healthcare. But I always grew frustrated when I was told oh, can you just do less stressful things? Or can you just take a break? I remember my doctor telling me that when it was me bootstrapping my company and it was just me. And she's like, can you just do less stressful stuff? And I was like, how do I do that? I have to do all these things. And so, yeah, exactly. 100% Christy. So this is the framework that addresses that in a lot of ways. This saved me in my own way of working. And I didn't even mention this in the other slide with the selfie of me being yeah, this is how I am now. That selfie was taken earlier this week when I'm in the middle of launching a program. And 3 years ago would have been oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out because I was very fortunate to have a lot of consultations booked in a very short period of time, 30 within 2 weeks. And I used this exact framework. I was like, I need to practice what I preach. And it saved me. And I didn't spend the weekend working all hours to get everything done. I was able to spend my weekend enjoying lunch with some of my best friends. And, we were saying before, and Sheena, you noted this, being a human. So I used this on myself last week and it helped immensely. Okay, so this is the 4-step framework. Restructure, that's what you start with. This is the meatiest part of the phase, and then integrate. And so like when we look at restructure is how you work, how you show up in your business. We're looking at mindset in addition to operations. And then integrate is new practices, routines, systems, and tools. You're integrating those. You're looking at what works best for you and your business specifically. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. And then the third phase is embody. So like you're embodying those new practices and those tools. So you're not treating meditation, for example, or other routines like a checklist item that just needs to get ticked off. So if you're meditating going like, okay, I have to meditate for 20 minutes because Lucy told me to, 20 minutes is up, done, check. No, we're not doing that. I would way rather, and I've done this with clients who don't have time to meditate, which is totally fine. Like, let's start by just taking 10 deep breaths before we sit down to work and embodying the feeling of feeling grounded and at ease. Like, that is the purpose of it. It's not just to tick something off. And finding the right practices that work for you and your business. Because yeah, it's different for everyone, like I said. And then the last stage is remind. At this stage, you have the tools in your toolbox. You know what works for you. You know what works for your company. And it's just to make sure that that phase is to set things up so that you can dip into that toolbox whenever you need it most. So for example, if you're launching something new, having a reminder in your calendar of like, okay, I'm going to check in with my toolbox and what I need during this time that I know I'm going to be a little bit, more stressed out. Okay, so Kathy, I really appreciate that valuable share. I'm going to go back to that momentarily so I can read it with intention. So thank you. Okay, so step 1, restructure, mindset. I would love for everyone here to reflect on your personal why. Now, to be clear, when we look at the why, in entrepreneurship, there's the personal why, like why did you decide to become an entrepreneur? And then there's the business why. Why did you launch this particular business? Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're a bit different. And so for me, this is my very real personal why. It's been the same for all 4 companies that I've launched. I want to feel free in how I work. I don't want to ask anyone for permission for time off or how I'm spending my time. Like right now, I'm calling you all from LA where I'm traveling for work. I don't have to ask anyone for permission for that. That's why I decided to be an entrepreneur, to travel, I mean, and while making a positive impact in the world. Okay. So, and using your personal why as your guiding light, I also want to note, in addition to this, it's really powerful to reflect on the why of your hustle. Now, I'm going to also share a very real example of this for me personally, and this is different for everyone. But for me, my parents were divorced when I was a teenager, and it was, I came from a household with a lot of financial scarcity. And when that happened, which it was a very, very hard time in our family for a multitude of reasons. But with the financial scarcity that came with that, we almost lost our house. And I'm the eldest of 2, and I remember feeling in that moment as a child, like, okay, I need to like structure my career, my life so that I can make sure that this never happens again to anyone in my family, that I can make sure that we don't lose our home. And so, like I said, it's a very different experience for everyone. This is just me sharing what happened. Like for me, when I reflect on the root of my hustle, because what happened after that was years of me being like, but I have to make the money to make sure that like my mom's okay, my dad's okay, my sister's okay, and like everyone's okay. And I remember my sister telling me years later, she's like, no one asked you to do this. We're all okay now, right? But that was when I really reflected on the root of my hustle and where that really came from. So I encourage everyone to just like reflect on this for yourself. And like I said, if anything comes up that you need support on, seek support from, perhaps a therapist or a coach, and someone who can guide you through that process. So that's one. And next is redefining winning. So this is a big one. Now I'm going to give an example of this because this is examined really well in the book Burnout. And just another way to look at this is redefining success and what success means for you. So instead of going after perfection in our business and like, I want to hit this financial goal, or I want to have X impact, and anything outside of that is a failure, looking at, okay, what is another way we can define being successful, defining winning. So this is a music example, but I think it still really resonates. Now in a recording studio, this was from the author of Burnout. And I love this example. She was guiding a huge group of people who are in a choir through like a recording process. And if you're recording music, it needs to, every second, every note needs to be perfect. And I've experienced that myself, having recorded in the studio, and it's a very different way of performing. And like when you're recording, you have to get perfection. And what was happening while this choir was recording is they were struggling to get perfection when you're in such a large group of people, and the energy was draining. They were getting more tired, and the quality was going down, and they were struggling to achieve quote unquote perfection. So what they were asked to do is instead, they were told, rather than going after perfect, your goal is to make the producer who's listening to everything and who's in the other room, they're like, make the producer feel joy. And that's what they were told. And when the choir was just told to like feel joy and they started recording again, it completely transformed how they were performing. And they were redefining winning. They were redefining success. And afterwards, they asked the producer, did you feel joy? And he said, yeah. And they got the recording. And I have so many other examples like this, but I really want to encourage you, like everyone here, reflect on what does winning look like for you in your business? If you can make an impact to one person, right? Like perhaps you've got the idea of like, I want to impact 20,000 lives within the next 5 years. Awesome. If we're able to break that down and say, if I could impact one person within the next couple of months, or if success to me means showing up and doing the absolute best I can. Let's say you're doing, I don't know, facilitating a workshop or something, showing up and doing the best I can, taking that with you. That goes a really long way. So I would love if anyone in the chat, if you can share how you define winning, I would love to hear. And also like, how can you redefine winning in a way that makes you feel really good and also takes some of the pressure off, because then you're not beating yourself up necessarily for not hitting specific financial goals, even though we're not saying get rid of the financial goals, but reflect on this for yourself. You could have one idea or 20. And also I'll put a link in the chat in the end to book a one-on-one with me. And if we book that one-on-one, we can unpack that together. Okay. So restructuring that in your mindset goes a really long way. Some other key pieces here is defining boundaries between work and personal life. So turn off notifications. Everyone here, I cannot stress this enough. If you can turn off Slack, email notifications, and even social media, please do it. This is going to help you to focus, and ensuring also, of course, your team knows how to get a hold of you if they absolutely need to. We're not saying they can't, but turn off notifications so you don't feel like you're getting poked all day with your attention being diluted. And that really helps with boundaries, focus, and just mental clarity. Also having start and end working hours is really powerful. And when your tasks are complete, your day is done. This is a big one I do with my clients, where we're not trying to fill up the time and saying, if I work 9 to 5 or 9 to 6 or 8 to 4 every day, that is success. Having your tasks list done the day before, never day of, and you're never adding anything to your task list day of unless it's like an absolute emergency. Because when you do that, it provides you the opportunity to sit down to do your work that day, knowing I just got to get these things done. Focus, like head down, and that provides you also the opportunity to increase your productivity. And also, like when we do that, if you finish your day early, amazing, go enjoy the day, go be human. A lot of the tactics that we're talking about is, yes, boundaries, different ways of thinking about things, but also increasing productivity and a sense of completion. When you check those things off, get a little dopamine hit at the end of your day, amazing. And when your work is away, when your computer is away, do not work. I don't want anyone here telling me that, Lucy, I was checking emails at 11 p.m. in bed. Nope, we don't need to be doing that. And when you're stressed, if something's coming up, you're in the middle of a launch, anything like that, just do the next best thing. Just do the next best thing. Whether that's like, oh my gosh, I have this like so many things to do. Okay, cool. What is going to get you to the result the quickest? So real example of like my own, with all those consultations that got booked, because I'm very like grateful that I did a workshop with Futurepreneur. It's this exact workshop. And we had 400 people register. Didn't expect that. My calendar was not ready for it. That happened very last minute, and amazing problem to have. And I'm so grateful for it. But I had to execute all those consultations and be present with everyone and bring the energy and hold space. And so what I did was like, next best thing. I was like, okay, no problem. I'm not going to post on my Instagram for like a week. That's not the best use of my time right now. I'm going to spend my time making sure I'm looking after myself so I can be fully present and supportive of the entrepreneurs who I've got meetings booked with. That is my number one. That is my absolute number one priority. Anything else, if it can be eliminated or it can be delegated, that's what I'm doing. What I also did was I started using an AI note taker in those sessions so that I didn't need to worry about taking notes. Fathom, highly recommend. It's so good. That also made my life easier. Okay. So, Candicia, I hope I'm saying your name correctly. Amazing. I'm so happy that resonates. Sheena, I'm totally with you. Putting your phone in another room makes such a big difference. And I'm glad that your sleep has been so much better as a result. I've also started doing that. And then having my phone on do not disturb for at least 1 hour after waking up. Okay. I'm just reading Kathy, your comment as well. Thank you for sharing that. And I love that your doctors were very supportive and told you that to do what you're able to do, to keep your company open with help from family and that support system. That's amazing. That's really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. And I'm glad also that you're starting to feel well recently. All right. So reframe. Rather than seeing stress as a threat, think about work-related stress as an exciting challenge to take on. I know this is easier said than done sometimes, but like what I really want to encourage everyone here to get out of is like, if something comes up, rather than going kind of, oh my God, like, believe me, I was that person for a very long time. Instead, I got this. And like credit where credit is due. This comes from Amanda Northcutt, who is a founder, and she and I really connected on navigating chronic health issues, specifically environmental health issues. She was diagnosed with Lyme disease twice, 2 different strains, and she's growing a 7-figure business. And this is what she does. And this is how she thinks about Lyme disease as well. She's like, I got this. Let's go. Okay, so also I'm going to zip through the rest of this, and everyone keep putting things in the chat if you have any questions. I'll do my best to keep checking because I really want to make sure that we also finish on time. So restructure your operations. This is my number one I have when it comes to operations. There's so much more that you can also dig into with regards to systems and streamlining things. But as a starting point, conduct a weekly audit to identify the tasks that you can streamline, automate, delegate, or eliminate. How you are spending your time. This is you just looking at where am I what's my starting point? So do an audit to see how you were spending your time. And then also implement meeting-free days. Fridays, everyone here, start having meeting-free Fridays and use that time to like put on the sweatsuit, go to your favorite coffee shop, get a nice fancy coffee. I personally just like put a messy bun in. I don't do makeup. I put my favorite music on, which is either European rock or EDM, and it's my deep work time. I just like get a ton done. So have meeting-free days and also 30-minute max meetings. I'm a huge advocate of that. That has been found to be the optimal meeting time. Because you can, if you structure it properly, you send an agenda ahead of time, rather than using meetings to like provide updates ahead of the meeting and just use meetings to make decisions within a group container or discuss. Yeah. And so here's your checklist for ops. After you've done your audit, look at what can you eliminate? And even if it's eliminating things temporarily, like that example I said, which is, I'm not going to post on social media for a week because it's not the best use of my time. I eliminated that for that week. Then I brought it back later because I have to do it and I enjoy it. What can you automate? So using different tools. I actually have a list of automation software. Should anyone want it, I'm happy to share it. What can you delegate? So whether that's to an existing team member or someone you can hire on a contract part-time basis, even if it's temporary. And what can you batch? Batch meaning doing a similar group of tasks all at once. So let's say that's emails. This is my favorite one that I'm going to encourage everyone here to go with. Do all your emails at once. So rather than checking your email throughout the day, answering them one at a time, do them once a day at like 2 p.m. boom, like it significantly increases your productivity. You get it done way faster because you're more focused. That also takes into consideration Parkinson's law, which states the work that we do occupies the time we allocate for it. So if you say, let's say you give yourself half an hour at 2 p.m. every day to do your emails, you're going to get it done within that half an hour, typically. If you give yourself like 3 hours throughout the day to do emails, you will occupy more space to do that. Of course, there are exceptions to that, but that's kind of the general principle. And if you've got a lot of emails you have to do it twice a day, right? And then also, how can you make this easier? This is also one of my favorite tips. Go through your task list and ask yourself, how do I make this easier? And update it accordingly, and then do that a couple of times. Because we as entrepreneurs, we want everything to be perfect and done to the best of its ability and with all the details. I am that person as well. But when you're bootstrapping or you're in the early days, like make things easier for yourself. And I like that exercise. I still do that for myself all the time. Okay. That's just me repeating that. Now let's talk about some self-care practices. So closing the stress cycle, this is a big one. And I really, if you're gonna take anything away from this presentation, this is one of them. So closing the stress cycle talks about hunter-gatherer societies. Now, this is kind of an unexpected thing for me to bring up in this presentation, but stay with me. So it illustrates the importance of movement in closing the stress cycle. So in hunter-gatherer societies, when our ancestors faced a stressful situation, such as encountering a predator, they would respond with physical movement, either by fighting or fleeing. And this physical activity allowed their bodies to discharge the stress hormones, so cortisol and others, released during the encounter. And once the threat was neutralized or they had successfully escaped, their bodies could return to a state of equilibrium. Now, in modern times, our stressors may not be the same as those faced by hunter-gatherer societies. It's an email, for example, but our physiological response still remains the same. So when we experience stress, whether it's due to work, relationships, other challenges, our bodies still activate the fight or flight response, releasing stress hormones like adrenaline, cortisol. But our ancestors had opportunities for physical movement built into their daily lives. So many of us lead, like we're sitting down to our desk, we may not be doing movement in the morning. And so we lack the regular opportunities for physical activity. And this can result in an accumulation of stress hormones in our bodies, leading to chronic stress and eventually burnout. So close the stress cycle through movement. There are also other ways to close the stress cycle that have been studied. Like that could be crying. Crying is one of the only ways our body can release cortisol. I'm a stress crier and I feel so much better after, but it could also be journaling, art, like ways of expression are other ways of closing the stress cycle. So just something to be mindful of if you're navigating highs and lows in your business, think about, okay, how can I close the stress cycle? Yeah, but a big way of that is movement, even if that's like a 10-minute walk. Or some people who really don't like movement, I've heard works really well for them is they'll just lie in bed and they'll tense their muscles and then release them as a way of just engaging with their body. And that's their way of closing the stress cycle. And so my recommendation, block 30 to 60 minutes of movement per day in your calendar wherever you can. And 3 to 6 days per week on average is what has been studied and proven to provide the best results. And then connection, reserve 30 minutes a day for a stress-reducing conversation. So in a study published, it was in 2003 in Biological Psychiatry by Thomas Insel and Sue Carter, participants underwent a psychosocial stress task while receiving either social support from a friend or a placebo treatment. And the study found that participants who received social support exhibited lower cortisol levels, so the stress hormone, and reported lower subjective stress compared to those who did not receive social support. So the study highlights the importance of social support from friends, family members, loved ones in attenuating stress responses. So like call a friend, send a voice note to a friend. Voice notes are my favorite. And connect. Okay, we're gonna zip through the rest. Everyone else, please, like I said, put any questions in the chat and I'll make sure to look at those either throughout or at the end or any comments. Mindfulness and meditation, highly recommend this to everyone. Like I noted earlier, this could be as simple as 10 deep breaths and like try adding that to your calendar. Like that could be after lunch, you just take 10 deep breaths to recalibrate, recenter before going back to work so that we're getting you out of the headspace of like, oh my gosh, I'm going all the time. Woo! And like nonstop, because that's not what we want. And then unplug. I also love this like very silly stock photo. Unplug to designate specific times to disconnect. Kind of like Sheena was saying, like putting your phone in another room, whatever that is, this is bringing it back to boundaries. And a new daily routine. So this is an example. This is also mine. But like, look at ways that you can rejig your daily routine to best support whatever you are going to start implementing, if anything, from this, this workshop and some of the tips that I've shared. So like 10 deep breaths after lunch, easy. But before work, that could be, so this is going to look different for everyone, like I said, but that could be meditating, journal, have a liter of water, short walk outside, or workout, eating a protein-rich breakfast aligned with your dietary needs and restrictions, and then working for 1 to 1.5 hours. You'll notice in here, I put like a short break, right? Because like you're not going to work productively if you work for 3 hours straight and don't stop. It's typical that like we can focus for like an hour at a time to like an hour and a half. Then you want to take a break, stretch, move your body. And at the end, you'll see here, like close computer, end of day, done. I'm going to go be a human now. And you'll also notice I blocked an hour for lunch, and not like for me, it's a nutritious lunch in line with my dietary needs. If I want to treat myself to some takeout, that's like a little special treat, then sure. Okay. But I want to encourage everyone here to start to tweak your daily routine to best support really how you want to be feeling in your business. So try these practices, move forward with what makes you feel good. That's the most important thing, not just something to be checked off the list. And put a reminder in your calendar to go back to some of these practices. Like it could be bi-weekly, weekly, daily, whatever it is, right? Like even if that was, let's say you're doing a launch, you're doing a big push for something, right? It's a big energy push. Put a little reminder in your phone. Like I love the reminders app in my phone. And that could be just simply a little reminder that pops up that says, do the next best thing, the next right thing for if you're feeling stressed, or make things easier for yourself. And like that little reminder, setting systems up to remind yourself of what is in your toolbox and makes you feel best or work your best. Okay, especially during moments of high stress. So this is your reminder of the framework. We've zipped through it. Each one of these things you can dive to like in a deep way, but there's still a lot that you can leave with today and start to integrate. So I'm going to give a quick example of Claire from Revolve Farms, which is in Ontario. It's an amazing farm. Go check them out. Go visit them. It's in Perth. And so Claire, like she was constantly overwhelmed, like writing lists down only on pen and paper and then keeping them in her pocket. And then she would go out, work on her farm. She's building things, like she's doing all the things, but she's feeling overwhelmed around just showing up daily in her business, and like this ever-growing to-do list that was filling her pockets with all these pieces of paper. And yeah, so basically Claire came to me and was like, I'm feeling overwhelmed and feeling really stressed about getting everything done. So we did this framework. We restructured her schedule, her task list, her calendar, and we then integrated because like we didn't need to have a conversation necessarily about like getting outside and movement, because it's, she's a farmer, she's outside all the time. But what she needed was different mindfulness practices and mindset reframes that are helping her feel good every day when she's showing up for business, and navigating some of those challenges as they come up, when like the tiles that they need are not the ones that showed up, things like that. So we transformed how she felt about her company as she was launching it and growing it. And we got her task list system and her ops on the back end all set up so that it was reducing the causes of stress. And she actually had a high level view on what was going on in her business. So we got her set up in Asana. We organized everything. And she really liked having the pen and paper like in her pocket. So we made sure that she could keep doing that. Anyways, it totally transformed how she felt in her business, and she felt less stressed and overwhelmed as a result by using this framework. Okay, let's zip through the end so we can finish on time. So I'm going to say really quickly, I am launching the Thrive program. It's 12 weeks of diving deep into what we just talked about. So it's live workshops and implementation sessions. Implementation sessions is my favorite aspect of this program. That's where we're getting on a call like with you. We're opening your calendar, we're opening your systems, and we're putting into practice with you all the things that we've talked about. We've got some amazing guest speakers. We've got naturopath, therapists. We have Laura Brigette from Three Ships, who's coming to share the story around how she battled and navigated brain cancer while growing a wildly successful business and her own well-being practices. There's a 24/7 community for support. So yeah, I'm super excited about it. I woke up this morning and talk about closing the stress cycle. I wasn't stressed. I was just happy, but I saw all these applications come in, which was really amazing. So yeah, here, basically in the container, you'll get all the framework and tools to confidently grow your company, optimize your schedule, a new mindfulness routine specific to your business. That's what the program is. And the last thing that I will share is part of today. So thank you again, Sheena, for having me. Is I'm offering free custom action plan sessions for your business. So I've got 10 spots. It is a $600 value each. So I put a link in the chat. I'd recommend booking ASAP because I only got 10 spots. So in this call, you will get an action plan of what you can start doing now to look at exactly what we talked about today, reducing the causes of stress and the overwhelm, and you'll get clarity and you'll get tips that you can start implementing right away. So yeah, that's it. That's a bit about me, Thrive. And also I look forward to connecting with you for anyone who books those sessions. And most importantly, Sheena, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And anyone who wants to ask questions, connect, put them in the chat, add me on LinkedIn. Yeah, it was great to be here. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Lucy, that was fantastic. I think, my biggest takeaway was just the refreshing yet painful reminder that it's often the most simple strategies that can have the biggest positive impact on our mental health and well-being, but simple and easy are two very different things, right? Like just because it might sound simple, but it can be difficult to actually consistently remember to put your phone in another room, for example, which I struggled with early on. So I just love how you brought it back to, these really great actionable takeaways that really kind of are foundational and important. And they're a good refresher for many of us who have maybe tried to do this and, fell off the wagon and lack consistency in some of these areas that are so important. So thanks for surfacing so much of that. And if there's any questions, you can put them in the chat box. But first, and we'll get to them if there are any that come in. But sincere thank you, Lucy, for hosting this workshop today. Again, there's so much value in it, and we are going to send like a full recap email probably tomorrow with the links and resources that Lucy has mentioned. And then in addition to that, I promised I would share the gift from Bobby Reset and Virtual Gurus. So they are offering 10 hours of free virtual assistant support with no obligation, except having a 20-minute productivity assessment call so they can better understand which areas in your business that would make sense to potentially delegate to a virtual assistant. And it really just fits in so nice with this idea of, again, like maintaining our mental well-being and, challenging ourselves. What can we delegate? What can we put off our plate? Can we challenge ourselves to not try and take ownership of all the little things that we might not we don't necessarily have to do, right? Customer service, social media, all of that. Virtual Gurus, their team can support that. So you'll have an opportunity to get 10 free hours for that. And then in addition, like Lucy has shared as well, she's generously offered the $600 value limited to 10 spots as well for the free one-on-one action plan. And then of course, a exclusive discount for our Founders Fund community to her Thrive program, which again, we will share more about that multi-week program in our recap email. So I just want to give a sincere thank you again to everyone today, all of our speakers for joining us and adding so much value to our community. And if you ever need to connect with us directly, you can do so at hello@foundersfund.ca. But otherwise, we will follow up with everyone who attended today in an email, and it will also include the link to today's video so that if you need a bit of a refresher or want to rewatch certain parts, you'll have that available to you as well. So have a great rest of your day, everyone. And thank you again for being a part of our event.